Good afternoon, everybody. It's me, Robert Phoenix. I am back again, and I'm going to be joined here with the Crimmies very shortly. And of course, we have the co-host, the astrological cat, has decided to jump in and be a part of the action. He's a rumbler. It's like about a 3.5 right now on the Richter scale. Hello, Susan Cano. How are you? There she is, Kestrel. I'll be talking to you very, very shortly. Lynette Jardine, what a pleasant surprise. Good to see you. There's Danica, Bo Blake, Double C, Craig Corporon, my man Steve Mercer in the house. Sheila Sampson, hello, Sheila. JMP Love, hello, Jacqueline. And there's Ian and Jennifer. Ashante Edwards, nice to see you, Ashante. Mary Grether, Z is here. Michael R. There's Joan S. So we got a great show ahead of for you guys today. Hey, there's my man Ryan Gucci the Goats. Present and accounted for, Tracy Ragsdale. Yes, indeed. There we go. Lindsay. Lindsay's showing up in real time. Good to see you, Lindsay. You're doing there okay out there in crazy California, where Governor Newsom has decided that he's going to shut everything down again. Ani Brito, the wench with the wrench. There she is. Good to see you. I've got another cat getting very jealous of the Jasper attention. You know who that is. The certifiable pain in the ass, also known as Rosie. Let's see. Who do we have? Danny J. What's going on, Danny? Good to see you. Christy Tesmer, the regular girl, is here. What's happening? Lisa Marie, speaking of California, chiming in from the lovely East Bay area. I've heard that the sheriffs in LA are not gonna back Garcetti and Newsom's insane orders. So there is still some cushion, some rubber between us and these completely nuts authorities. Let me just make sure that the Crimmy's got the link. This should be on here pretty soon. So we're going to talk about Lord Malloch Brown, who seems to be a fairly integral appendage to this vote scam that's going on. We're going to take a look at him, his background, and make some connections with some information coming out of Georgia today, which is kind of mind-blowing. It's kind of mind-blowing. And then in hour number 2, we have the author of this book right here. It is a tangled tree. A tangled tree. And it is My Father's Path to Immortality. And the author is Ayana Cizik Blott, who also happens to be Jordan Foltz's wife. So we're going to have her on in the second hour of the show, and she's going to be sharing her life and her experience growing up with a wild guru father. And we'll learn also more about what it is to be a millennial mother, and a millennial mother that doesn't necessarily fit into the crucible of the modern narrative. So we'll get some insight into that. And apparently she had a little wispy thing happen to her in one of her videos. So we get to revisit the wisp as well. Let's see. There's Jill. Jill's here. Julianne. Hi, Julianne. Mary Black. We do not need a cashless society. What is the chat is moving pretty quick now, so I got to catch up to that. Mary says, I'm most interested in what Mary says. What does she got here? We don't need a cash society, but a bankless society. That's a really great statement. I would tend to agree with that. I would tend to agree with that. Let's see who else we have here. We have Natasha. Hi, Natasha. Kane coming in loud and clear from Ireland. Leon Luis, think the California sheriff would love to arrest Newsom. He could, if he wanted to. That could happen. Jaylana, fairly integral appendage. Yes, he's a fairly integral appendage. Mr. Malloch Brown. Yeah. So I just wanted to be clear yesterday when I was talking about rock and roll icons that I don't support Bono. I think he's a creep. Okay. I've seen U2 about 5 times. The last time I saw U2 was a friend of mine purchased a ticket for me, and it was 2 years ago in Houston, or a little bit over that. And I'm just even then I was not a big fan of Mr. Houston, Paul Houston, and the first part of the show was okay. They played the hits, and let's face it, no matter what you think of Bono, U2 is a great band. I mean, The Edge is just a mind-bending, really talented guitar player, just incredible. And then, of course, the rhythm section is quite good. But then in the second part of the show, oh my God, it was not good. It was not good. It was so political and so sort of looking pretentious, and it was dismissive. All the things that you would expect from a band that's literally talking down to the audience. And this was in Houston, so this is a fairly conservative crowd, and there were some very visible groans at various points during the second half of the show when Bono would use his platform to push everything from climate change to sex change. So, but when I first saw U2, which was way back in the day, I saw U2 when I was, I think, either 19 or 20. It was their first tour of the U.S., and it was their second swing up the coast in California. And they had a band called Romeo Void open for them. I'm sure you guys know who Romeo Void are. The show was amazing. I mean, it was about as close to a religious experience as you could get with a rock and roll show. That was the early U2. And I saw them successive times. And, they really dropped off my radar a long time ago. Like, I really stopped listening to them, I think, after the pop record. And then the more I read about Bono and the more I read about his ridiculous, nonprofit NGO efforts, it was just like, this guy's a total fraud and he's dangerous, and I want nothing to do with this band. In fact, I was really pissed off when my iPhone came with their album on it and I couldn't get it off. It's like, I was not happy about that. But so yesterday I said that, in the first 2 albums that he was a very powerful frontman for that band, but that was in no way any endorsement of Bono by any stretch. But I did endorse Robert Plant, and of course there's a lot of high strange around Led Zeppelin, but again, I only endorsed him from this perspective of being this archetype of this lead singer and kind of rock icon. Other than that, I mean, I think Robert Plant has paid his dues, and probably will continue to pay his dues. And then some. He's had a lot of tragedy in his life. So whatever hijinks they were involved with, he's had to deal with that in this lifetime, actually. Let's bring the Crimmies on.
Hey.
What's going on, kids?
All right.
Hello.
All right.
How'd you?
Not an easy entree into your steam yard, but we're okay.
Well, you're here now, and it's gonna get hot in the steam yard.
Here now. We are here now.
Yeah. You're both looking good today.
Thank you. Y tú también.
Yeah,
You look good
yeah.
in blue, Robert.
Yeah, they say that blue is able to transmit a feeling of like, trust and integrity and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
I try to use the power symbolism as often as possible.
It suits you. It looks very nice.
No, so when I was a kid, my favorite color was red. I was really into
really?
red. Oh yeah.
Huh.
And then I found out that all these other kids liked red. I said, "Fuck it, I'm going to like blue instead."
I don't know right.
So I'm kind of reintroducing myself to red again.
I love red.
Red and black was the color of the 80s.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
it was. Yeah, it was, especially black. I wore a lot of black in the 80s. That was my thing.
I love black and I love red.
That was my uni. Black t-shirt, black jeans, black boots.
Yeah, it looks good. I know.
No,
Black
no.
leather jacket.
I did have one. I had a black leather jacket with a BMW pin on it. It had a little belt on it and everything. It was badass. Yeah. Kind of wish I still had that jacket, but so what's going on? What's going on down there in North Carolina?
Well, I guess they're tightening the thumb screws on the mask wearing.
Especially with the businesses. So they're going after the businesses now. There's a snitch hotline for anyone who sees anybody not wearing a mask in a business.
It's happening in every town now across America, and it's being instituted by city managers in conjunction with globalist third parties. So I'm going to read you guys a text that came from Jeanette. Some of you may remember Jeanette. She was one of the people that worked on the anti-fluoride campaign here.
Okay.
And she sent me something very interesting, if I can just find it really quickly, about sort of the roots of this thing. Give me 1 second. The roots and connections. Here we go. Okay. It says here. Let's see. It has to do. Okay, I'm not seeing it. Oh, it came from somebody else. I know who it came from. It came from Tanya. Apparently, the UN is in on this thing in terms of funding. Let me see if I can find what she's wrote to me. Okay. All right, hold on. All right, so this is what I have. It says, let's see, we need to push them to classified time. Curious what the plane calls, face coverings. Okay, I'm going to have to circle back to this, but I know that I have some information here where that money is coming from. But apparently in this town, the people that are behind this, and you could probably track this just about any other town in America, you have the city manager, you have the local hospital or the county health commission, and you have the Chamber of Commerce. So the Chamber of Commerce are involved, and the Chamber of Commerce are basically, closet internationalists at a local level.
Interesting, because when we get our Airbnb permit from the city, we pay $200 for that permit every year. We get nothing for it, but that money does not go to the city. It goes to the Chamber of Commerce.
That's right. So the Chamber of Commerce, essentially, most city business has to go through the Chamber of Commerce.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The city theoretically is dealing with municipal issues, right? But it's the Chamber of Commerce that works hand in glove with the city to approve or disapprove or bring businesses in or make it difficult for other businesses. Right. So they're kind of the city is a corporate entity, but they're the commercial kind of wing of the corporate entity with the Chamber of Commerce. So, and the Chamber of Commerce usually works very close with the city manager, and the city manager is been kind of drafted to work with the Smart Cities program, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. The city managers are the ones that are basically implementing a lot of these global changes. So if you look at the mask mandates and the snitch hotlines, those are the three entities that you'll see that are at the sort of the axis of this. And what happens with the city council and the mayors is that they can play dumb, and they can say, oh, well, we didn't do this, this wasn't on our watch, this has been set up, through a different channel. And what we've seen is like there's no accountability anymore.
Mm-hmm.
There's this really weird gray area now because the so-called social contract has been broken.
That's right.
And even here, when Jeanette and some of the poll watchers were trying to get in and actually watch the election, the guy who's the election judge here, who was basically cock blocking them this time and then the previous election, he was getting emails directly from the Secretary of State here in Texas. They were communicating with the Secretary of State real time. And basically the Secretary of State was showing what the protocol for poll watching and observation was. And they were showing this not only digitally, but they had printed it out in a piece of paper and they brought it to the election judge. And the election judge says, well, we just have a disagreement of how this is interpreted.
But doesn't then all that go back to what we talked about last month with the Secretary of State project?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That was
but in this
funded?
instance, the Secretary of State was on the side of theoretically the quote unquote citizen, right? Like the Secretary of State had their back and said, this is really how this is supposed to work inside the state of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you would think hierarchically that the Secretary of State would rank over some little part-time election judge. Mm-hmm. That's not what happened. The part-time election judge said, we have a difference of opinion on how this is interpreted. Right. So what are you going to do in that moment? Is the Secretary of State going to come run down from Austin and bring the sheriffs out and remove the guy? That's probably not going to happen. So this is a breakdown of command and command, authority, chain of command. It's just not there. It's just no longer there. So when you look at what's happening with, the COVID, the hotline and all this bullshit, the city council and the mayors are in that same kind of, see no evil, hear no evil, do no evil, speak no evil. This gray zone. Oh, well, we didn't do that. That's not, well, we don't have anything to do with that. Oh, we're not sure, where this is going and how this is happening. Right. Or they may have a couple of very vague talking points. Well, when something happens, it goes to the TABC or it goes to the Board of Health. We're out of the loop on that. But no, it happened on your watch. Mm-hmm. And you're the ones that are supposed to be looking after our interest. And so this is clearly what's happening. And it even goes down into what we're going to talk about today with the whole election process and how some guy in England is ironically connected to a poll worker in Georgia, basically carrying out the mission that this guy and a number of these other people at what we call a global elite level has set into motion. It's a very odd alliance, but one that's worth exploring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so just to go back to our case, it's the county commissioners who are doing this, which and also to your point, it's not even the accountability, but it's the traceability that's part of this. And so we can if we get to it with all these shell companies buying and selling each other, and I don't even want to get to the point of trying to explain it because it's just too much time and it's not worth the trouble. But it's the point of tracing, like I said, tracing this sort of chain of command. And so this person that we'll talk about later, Mark Malloch Brown,
Lord Mark.
And I don't say Lord because I don't give anybody the I wouldn't give anybody the title.
Good.
So or if I say it, I'll say Lard.
Lard. But, I was gonna say go Lard. You read my mind, Lard.
Yeah. So that'd be like the best thing. But so on the other side, so what I've done, I think I talked about it at the chat room maybe a couple of days ago, that with this hotline, I decided to open up I think it's called Hushmail account. and Hushmail, you can send untraceable emails to people, and you kind of make up the name. So so I know masked Nazi businesses in the area. So I sent to the hotline, that, oh my gosh, I was there and there was this couple without a mask. It's horrible. Please do something.
Right? Gemini, good for you.
So, I got to have a little fun. So I haven't had fun with this freaking thing, the whole time.
That's Gemini really. Magic, man. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be inverting their world and holding up the dark mirror so that they can see themselves. Right. Good job, Steve.
Right.
Bravo.
And the name I adopted was Karen Capo.
Karen Capo.
So it's something, but the fact is you can just flood them. And then at the same time, I haven't started yet, but flood them with actual information and CC the county commissioners. And either way, just flood them with a bunch of stuff that makes them completely ineffectual.
Yeah,
it's kind of like what happened when de Blasio started the one in New York City, and everybody was sending him pornographic pictures to the line and things like that, and they completely disabled it.
That's right. They shut it down.
Now it's useless. They had to shut it down.
That's right.
Right. So they've decided to create a Kafkaesque labyrinth for us to move through.
Yeah.
Right. But what they didn't realize is that we have wings, and we can get above these things.
And we have brains.
Right. What's that Bowie movie, The Labyrinth, or something like that?
Where he plays Gareth, right?
He's standing up above it or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's something, gets me a little chuckle through my day, and but either way, and then the ironic part, of course, is that here's the Chamber of Commerce making it unbelievably difficult for businesses to exist. In a tourist town.
Oh, so I have a story around that. Down the road here, we have a lovely couple they're Indian, right? They're Hindi, Indian. They're wonderful. They don't live here. They live in Bernie down the road, but they do compounding. So they're the
pharmacy.
Yes, they're the right people. They're the right people to go to for compounding.
Oh, wonderful.
So I go there for a few things that I get, and so one day I struck up a conversation with them, and I said, "So how do you like it here in Fredericksburg?" And then she, kind of unloaded and said, "They made it so difficult for us to have this business. So difficult. They made us jump through hoops of fire to have this business. They said that our counter had to be X amount of height."
They do that here too.
And then when they got to that level of height, they said it was the wrong level, right? That's total gaslighting. They totally gaslight these people. They have a banner like on the highway because their business is like on the corner of State Street and the highway. And across the street, they had another business with a banner. And they were saying, well, you can't have a banner on your property. And they're looking right across the street and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, there's a business right here that has the same banner or a similar banner. And they said, if you don't step to it, we're going to hire a lawyer and we're going to come after you. And so that's all the city needed to hear. It's like, oh, okay, you can have your business now. But they're not. Cities are strangely not pro-growth. They are strangely not pro-growth. And I have a theory about that. My theory is that they are moving. And the reason why I have this theory is because of the city manager in this town, this guy, Kent Myers. And Kent Myers used to be the city manager at Port Angeles. And I'm going to do a thing on him at some point, not right now in access. But what I will say is that when he was in Port Angeles, tourism went down, tax revenue went down, a pretty significant business, which was a pulping business, and that's the timber area. It's right there near the Olympic rainforest. That went out of business. Complete downturn, right, in their economy. Prior to that, he'd been in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and I've checked this out. He turned away so many businesses to be in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? Why is this happening? It's because they want third-party government money. They don't want like real businesses in many cases to succeed. They don't want that. They want to set up third-party relationships with either NGOs, governmental bodies, or in this case, with the mask stuff. I'm pretty sure they're getting UN, who Bill Gates money. And I think this is, they've been kind of morphing into this model where they actually want to discourage business and growth. What they do want to encourage is money coming from grants, third parties, and outside sources. That's my takeaway.
It's crazy.
All right. Well, yeah. In here they only encourage hotels. That's pretty much the only business that they encourage.
Oh, and hideous ones, with Soviet block building architecture.
Right.
But I really like what you said about a week or two ago. You just used the word about them. They're sadistic.
Well, they are sadistic.
That's it. That's exactly it in a nutshell. They're sadists. That they seem to get their jollies from seeing people suffering and being able to control people.
Well, they have the psychopathic virus, right?
Yeah, well, it's the pinchos tyrannos. It's the petty tyrants, that Carlos Castaneda talks about.
I mean, to go into politics or to go into business and to retain your humanity and your heart is a very challenging.
It shouldn't be.
Very challenging exercise, and people wind up figuring out that it's easier to become infected by the psychopathic virus and play the game if you're going to play that game, right? Mm-hmm. It goes back to when Joe Strummer was in what they call public school in England, and he looked around and he said there were two classes of people, right? One who got their ass kicked and the other who were kicking their ass. And he said, well, I knew which group I wanted to be a part of. And it wasn't the ones who got their asses kicked. And it gets sorted out real fast in that way.
Yeah.
So,
learn in school.
Well, yeah, but it's also the strange, ugly, face of social Darwinism. And what we're all trying to do, I think, is create a third way, which is we're not going to be passive, but we're also not going to, be overly psychopathic and try to play that game. We're really trying to sort through the weeds here and create a different thing.
See it for the game that it is.
Well, it's kind of funny. We actually on Scoobs' recommendation, we watched The Fountainhead last night. The night was it 49, 47 version, 1949.
I don't know what year
of The Fountainhead, and and it was really complete over the top dialogue written by Ayn Rand. And based on her book. But, in the end, the architect goes on trial for being an individual.
John Galt, right? This is the John Galt character. Yes.
No, Rourke. Rourke is
okay.
called in the movie. Yeah. And it's played by
Gary Cooper?
Gary Cooper.
Gary
Cooper, the laconic. You can't say Gary Cooper without saying laconic.
He really was laconic.
And so anyway, but the whole thing, evolves and, and his sticking to his principles. But in the end, he's not on trial for the crime he committed, but he's on trial for being an individual and sticking to his principles. And, the rabid mob of collectivism, they even use the word collectivism in the movie, which I thought was prescient, was all part of that. So the whole thing was, was interesting and masterful use of lighting. In a black and white movie. Oh, it's just gorgeously shot.
But I guess the only part that it put us into sort of cognitive dissonance, because he is the architect who's cutting edge and he's coming in with this god-awful, soul-deadening architecture. Right. And to the point where somebody wanted to put, we're going to put balconies on your building. He's like, what? You're going to put balconies? Why? Well, we wanted to add a human touch. No. He ends up blowing up the building.
Oh, good.
Because they put it up in a way that he did not approve of. So he actually went out and surreptitiously physically blew it up. And that's where he was on trial.
That's a spoiler alert right there. That didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, it was, you saw it coming a mile away.
But,
so it's okay.
It was kind of hard for me to swallow cheering this individual on, yet at the same time, what he's bringing in is this beast of
it's kind of like Ayn Rand.
Architecture.
It's kind of like Ayn Rand, right? You listen to the ideas, go, objectivism, that's interesting. I agree with that. I agree with that. And then you find out that she's a hardcore Zionist. Was lovers with Alan Greenspan, and looks like a hideous witch. And then all of a sudden you're like, can I really wrap my arms around this ideology?
I guess there were no absolutes. Yeah.
No, but but it's worth it for the art's sake to have them played out in front of you, and then you just that's what art is. You watch them played out, and then come to your own
They kept
thoughts.
wanting to put classical facades on his building to just bring a human touch into it, and they were poo-pooing the classics and saying, that is just like,
it's what the people
because
want.
the classics are sentimental, right? That's
whatever they're. I don't know.
It's looking to the past. It's sentimental. It's built on emotion and ties to another time,
but it's also built on sacred principles.
Well, theoretically it is, but they would view it as being subjective and emotional and inconsequential in some ways, right? Because objectivism would have nothing to do with that. Objectivism would be very sharp and crisp and didactic.
And that's what the architecture reflects.
Right. Separate the wheat from the chaff. That's how it would work. Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I've always seen it floating around. I've never watched it. So maybe
it was worth a watch.
It was worth it.
The acting was awful by our standards today. It was so stilted and melodramatic. It was laughable in a lot of places. How stiff it was.
I've got a movie, since we're on the subject of old movies. I have a movie that I want to recommend. I can never remember the name of it, so I'm just going to have to do a quick just search here. It's with William Holden, who's one of my favorite older actors, and and a lot of these people that we like from that period of time, they're all pretty much lefties, so it doesn't really matter in a lot of ways. But he was in The Wild Bunch, and I think he's again, you said laconic. I would say William Holden is iconic. And let me just find this movie. It's a really, really interesting movie about a corporate takeover, and it's called the Executive Suite. So I highly recommend this movie to people for a number of different reasons, because you can see sort of the psychopathic spirit in this film. And so this is the plot. While in New York City to meet with investment bankers, 56-year-old Avery Bullard, president and driving force of the Treadway Corporation, a major furniture manufacturing company in the town of Millburg, Pennsylvania, drops dead in the street. As he collapses, he drops his wallet. It is picked up by a bystander, emptied of its cash, and shoved into a wastebasket. Without the wallet, there's no way to immediately identify the body as Bullard. George Caswell, a member of the Treadway board of directors and one of the investment bankers with whom Bullard had just met, sees what he believes is Bullard's body in the street below their office and decides to profit from the information. He engages a broker to make a short sale of as much Treadway stock as he can before the end of the trading day. Caswell plans to make an easy profit and cover the sale by buying Treadway stock at a 10-point discount on Monday, when the news of Bullard's death will presumably push the stock price down. Caswell begins to doubt that it was Bullard who died, but when he reads in a newspaper that a man had the initials AB on his clothes and cufflinks, he calls the police to tip them off to the identity of the deceased. Bullard had never named his successor. Over the next 28 hours, Treadway's executives vie for the position of president. Once news of his death reaches Treadway, company controller Lauren Shaw takes the initiative in arranging Bullard's funeral and coordinating the company's public reaction. In doing so, he undercuts treasurer Frederick Alderson, one of Bullard's close friends, and this effectively diminishes Alderson in his own eyes, so he won't seek the presidency. So it's a real power play between three people who eventually are in competition to become the next CEO of this company. So you have Frederick March, who is Lauren Phineas Shaw. He's the vice president controller, and this guy is a money guy. You have William Holden, who is the vice president in charge of design and development. Then you have the always hot and big Barbara Stanwyck, right? Then you have June Allison, who is the loving wife of William Holden. Shelley Winters is in here.
Oh God!
Yes, she's a mistress.
And Walter Pidgeon.
Yeah, and Walter Pidgeon plays the right-hand man, and so This is actually the beautiful Nina Foch right there. So lovely right there. Anyway, this is a really good movie.
Huh.
And there's a lot of themes in this movie about integrity, family, loyalty, commitment, the commitment to quality and product versus mass manufacturing and cheap products. And in a lot of ways, it's a bit of a fairy tale because that world no longer exists.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want something that's inspirational and from another time that can remind you of values that I think are important, that's a really good movie.
Good. It's funny. I can't think of Shelley Winters without her getting stuck in the portal in the Poseidon Adventure.
She won an Oscar for that movie.
She's the best supporting, probably.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another Shelley Winters movie which is worth watching is Harper, the detective movie with Paul Newman. She plays an astrologer in Harper.
Oh, really?
Harper is a trip. One of these days, I'm going to do just a show devoted to that movie because there are all kinds of weird, esoteric, occult symbols in Harper.
That might be a good Sunday night show.
Well, let me tell you, man, that movie is loaded. And it is the first movie, by the way, where the criminals actually get off the hook. So that movie sets a standard. Like there's almost like this deal with the devil with Harper. It's an interesting movie. So
we should move on.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Let's get into it.
I know we could just go for hours.
Let's bring up this character. Let's give you guys a visual of who we're talking about here. I have
Malloch Brown. Let's should we do the visual?
Did you want to do the sorry, okay, so you didn't want to go to the election thing, or
let's start at the top and then we'll work down.
Okay.
Let's start with the Malloch Brown stuff.
Okay.
And let me hold on.
Do you want to do the visual with the
I got the movie. I got a movie clip up.
Just do it real quick. So because
what I want to do is I want to show people Malloch Brown first.
Yeah.
So that they understand like what this guy looks like. Then I have
I was thinking the opposite, that we should set up what he's in resonance with. His name is in resonance.
We'll get there. I just want let's get a visual.
Okay.
Right. This is the guy that we're talking about right here. Lard Malloch Brown, global reformer. Lard. There he is right here. He's all over the place. And of course they have him in cahoots with the bag man, George Soros, who's really nothing more than a middleman and a bag man. Here's another imposing picture of this fellow. It's probably the same one. So what I also copied here are your notes, and I'm going to throw up some of these notes so people can see.
Okay, good. I was just looking for him.
Yeah, I got it covered. Give me one sec here.
Well, and the thing is too, he's a real smooth salesman for what he's selling. Because if you listen, he's just so reasonable and so, unflappable, when he's doing interviews.
So here we go. This is what you sent me.
Right. Okay. So what I'm going to try to follow along without, reading too much, but I'm going to have to, because there's an article written by someone named Matthew Earhart. And Matthew runs something called the Canadian Patriot Review. And he did what I thought was a good article about who this guy is. And this is other information that kind of got from, Wikipedia and other sources. But you can actually look at the top of that and you see he went to, I thought one of the curious things was so he's British, went to school in Magdalen College, which is Cambridge. And you can see some of the luminaries from Cambridge, C.S. Lewis, Michael Redgrave, and then other people associated with it are T.S. Eliot, Nelson Mandela, Rudyard Kipling, Seamus Heaney, and someday I'll tell you my Seamus Heaney story when I met him. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature in '96. He was an Irish poet. But I thought it was really interesting. So one of the old members of that was someone named Christopher Wray, who in 1574 was a judge who presided over the trial of two men who tried to free Mary Queen of Scots.
Of course, Christopher Wray being the namesake of the current head of the FBI.
Yeah. So someone whose own head may be on the chopping block at the moment.
So what's the connection with the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor? What's that about?
So you find that all these British operatives, so this all runs back to what we talked about for the Pilgrim Society and this attempted control of the United States through the Pilgrim Society, through British operatives.
And the Queen's Privy Council.
The Queen's Privy Council is huge in this.
Which sounds like a small group. It's really like 300 people, right?
Right. Malloch Brown is a member of the Queen's Privy Council, which kind of makes you automatically part of the Pilgrim Society. But this is what happens. So he goes to Cambridge, one of the two, prestigious schools in England. And then he goes to the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Now, why is that? I can't say exactly, but what it is, it establishes you a base of contact in Michigan. And I don't know how close Ann Arbor is to Detroit, but so much is coming out of Detroit when we looked into the Secretary of State of Detroit.
Jocelyn Benson, who is a Pilgrim Society member, right?
Right. So there's all this connection. So there's a lot of things circling around Detroit and what's going on there, and especially the university that she was part of, and the law schools there. So I guess it gets you established in the United States. Probably, maybe even gets you dual citizenship.
And that whole area is really tied into, like that's where Kathy O'Brien is from.
That's right.
Kathy O'Brien is from Michigan,
and Gerald Ford. And that's
so
where that whole cascade
Gerald
begins.
Ford, and she gets sold out to Guy Vanderjack, who at that time was the governor of Michigan.
Yeah, by her father.
Right, and then thence to Gerald Ford, but also so there's an island in Lake Michigan that
is it Mackinac or something like that?
Yeah, there's some. Yeah, it may have been near. Yeah, I think it's a unknown island, but it's just a small one where she's taken, and the governor has a place there, and that's where things happen.
I'd also like to remind people, if you're not clear, and when we keep referring to the Pilgrim Society, to go back and listen. We did a segment with Robert on that, and it's a British organization that is extremely influential in world politics, but in American politics in particular. And that spawned the SES, the Senior Executive Service here in America, that its employees cannot be fired.
And the Trilateral Commission.
And blah, blah, blah.
Elihu Root, who's someone you mentioned on your show too before.
That's a really important key to understand the importance of this man's work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, by the way, I went back. Yeah. So, and all our podcasts all our podcasts with you are also on the Logo Sophia website under a little button in the middle of the page that says podcasts. And I went back and counted, and this is our 27th video together.
Wow.
Oh, cool. So very good.
9 times 3 times 3 times 3. So, so this person, besides being the if he is a person, besides being the head of the Smartmatic Corporation, which is kind of his latest gig, which is involved with Dominion Voting Systems, which is also involved with another couple of other companies, and also Bain Capital. So these sort of companies go bankrupt, go re-rupt. They get passed back and forth. So and it's too tangled to even bother trying to figure out. Just know that Bain Capital, which is our dear friend
Mitt Romney, and Bain Capital is essentially a hedge fund that is like a school of piranhas. And what they do is they go in.
Piranhas, I like it.
And they go in and they buy companies and they strip the companies of their assets. Right, they sell everything off, and then they leave the companies essentially barren, useless, people out of work.
Right.
There's another word for it. It's called vulture capital.
Right. Which is the point that Malloch Brown bought it after they had it, and I think eviscerated it. He bought it, and then I guess was able to either just use it as a shell, as a name, to insert the voting machines and the software that runs them. And we know that all goes back to Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. So interesting too.
Yeah, that's a
Tell
big
about
deal.
the guests we just had.
Oh, we just had these lovely guests last week and made a really nice connection with them. And the woman is Venezuelan, and she was just like, what's wrong with Americans? Don't they see what's happening? Don't they see that this socialism is what destroyed Venezuela? She said, it's just a nightmare down there. And she was just horrified. She said, I can't even speak about it, because to see what's happening is what I lived through in Venezuela. That's why I left. And she said, I don't know why Americans can't see this. There's this, this blind spot. So, that was firsthand verification for us, like we needed it. Yeah. But she was such a lovely person.
And two of the biggest shareholders. So Smartmatic goes back and it's tied in Clinton Foundation, of course, Soros Foundation. But two of the biggest shareholders are Terry McCulloch, who's Dianne Feinstein's husband, and I got that right? No. Sorry, Terry McCulloch is Pelosi's. Sorry,
Pelosi's.
Terry McCulloch
is Dick Bloom.
Right. So the two biggest heroes are Bloom and Pelosi's chief of staff, Terry McCulloch. So two of the Cullough.
McCullough. Okay.
So they're two of the biggest shareholders in Dominion. So you see who has a large investment in it. He's involved with he's very involved with George Soros from the beginning with the Open Society. He's a top advisor for the World Economic Forum, and I'm sure he's advising our dear buddy Mr. Schultz as we speak. And then he was a former vice president of the World Bank, and then hugely tied in with he also was UN Deputy Secretary General. So, I mean, that's astonishing for one person to have all those, enormous connections.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, you may even just have to cut to the chase here. Because
by the way, I sent Ayanna an email, and I asked her to come on a little bit later, so we have a little bit more time.
Okay.
So don't feel like you have to squeeze it in. I asked her to. Oh, she's. Let's see. Is she here? She's gonna come in. I think at 20 after. That was what I.
Okay.
So yeah.
Oh, that's good.
She's probably helped. That probably helps her too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, he's just this guy Malloch Brown is a huge player. So he's part of the Pilgrim Society. He's involved with election software. He cut his teeth in the Philippines in the 90s by working for George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State.
I think so.
Yeah,
I guess at the time,
a member of the Hoover Institute.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so what he did was, for example, in one of the elections, even though Corazon Aquino was going to lose, he wrote a victory speech for her. She was running against Marcos. And according to the writer of the article, and I don't know enough to know whether it's true, his point is that Marcos was trying to make Philippines independent of the world banks and all the systems of control around it. So obviously, Aquino, Corazon Aquino, and there are rumors that Michael Aquino has died too. Just to throw that
I heard that
outside.
Michael Aquino died. Did you hear that, Robert?
Yeah, her husband was somebody by the name of Benito Aquino, right?
Yeah, or son, I think.
Yeah, so you had Corazon Aquino, Cory Aquino, Benito Aquino, and then it's very interesting that now we look back at these events and we see them through different eyes.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Remember how they made such a big deal out of Imelda Marcus's shoe collection?
I was thinking of that this morning. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
It was all about her shoes.
Which was massive. But yeah.
But they're masters at that. Go ahead. No,
yeah. So anyway, but this is where he cuts his teeth. I guess this is where they test you out. So if you're successful, then you move up, as an operative. So what he was doing, he wrote the speech for Aquino, which was a victory speech, and he fabricated an exit poll through George Shultz's operatives that said that she had won. So even though Marcos had probably won the election, who knows, but it cast doubt, and then it was the beginning of his downfall. Whereas everybody in the public and whatever newspapers that they had bought off were saying, no, this is it, this is terrible. So this is where he learns how to fix elections. And then he worked, I think I have also, he's working also in Latin America, Peru, Chile. So this is what he did in the 90s. Then in the mid 90s, he joins the World Bank. And then, so this is where he's connecting the World Bank's agenda with the UN agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And then
let me just drop in real fast on the World Bank for a second, okay? One of the key books that exposes the relationship between the World Bank and the IMF is Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Oh, yes.
By John Perkins. And what Perkins goes into great detail is how he, working for the IMF / the World Bank, would go into third world countries who were desperate for money for whatever reason, right? They needed to fight somebody or they'd blown through whatever capital they had. What they would do is they would go in and they would make a deal with the person who was in charge, and then the money would be loaned to them, right? They would be loaned to them. And then what would happen is that the terms and conditions of the loan were almost impossible to pay back.
Right.
And in most cases, these people had no way of paying it back. Maybe they had to, stop the bleeding, whatever, or they were just greedy, whatever. So they default on the loan. And then Perkins comes back in, or somebody like him comes back in and says, hey, look, it's okay. We'll forgive the loan, but here's what you have to do. You have to sign your resources over to us for perpetuity.
Right.
And you also have to vote with us when it comes time to play with, with the UN or whatever, right? So why is this important? It's important because when you look at countries like Chile, Peru, Ecuador, countries that were at the mercy of John Perkins and the IMF and the World Bank, they will do whatever the World Bank and the IMF tell them to do, including enforce the most draconian COVID and mask restrictions that they're being told to do. So a lot of what we're seeing from the World Bank perspective, a lot of what countries are actually doing is a result of having to repay their loan.
Good point.
This is why a lot of these countries are bending and getting on the knee, because contractually they're obligated to.
Well, and beyond contractually, I remember reading that book, and I remember one point thinking, gee, why don't these people resist that? Why do they sign a pact with the devil?
Well,
what they would do is, if you did not agree, if you did not comply, they would send in what they called the jackal.
Right.
And then the jackal would come in and go after the family, go after some very dire, extremely important aspect of that person's life or the country's life or whatever.
They would stage a coup, which is...
Yeah, the jackals would come in and they would be backed into a corner and have no recourse.
Right.
So, I stopped jumping so quickly to condemn once I knew, it's not just that you're willing to make a pact with the devil. Sometimes they threaten your life or your family's life or whatever they do.
Yep.
So it's not always something that can be resisted.
And we could even, turn that around to our situation here in this country. What happened in 2008 and 2009? Basically the country went bankrupt completely. Yes. Somebody had to bail us out. And who was it? Well, apparently it was China. Right. So now what's going on? Like, what kind of unspoken contract or agreement or debt is being serviced now by these various governors of the United States?
Didn't President Trump just recently retweet a meme of a lion being attacked by jackals?
Yeah, that was from That was from Christopher Walken. It was a Christopher
Was
Walken.
it?
Yeah.
I just remember that image.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, he just signed an executive order either today or yesterday saying that all AI companies have to be American at this point, which I don't know if that makes it better, but I guess at this point I prefer over Chinese ones. But anyway.
So this guy he's totally embedded, and he is traceable now to the most current operation of flagrant voter fraud that I've ever witnessed in my lifetime.
Right.
Oh, anybody?
And also looking back, he's also, it's like in the People Power Revolution in the Philippines they're saying is many were the first successful color revolution. So he was at the forefront of the color revolution things. All right. And then you see, so from the World Bank and the UN, I have, quotes from speeches where he's just, all about, limiting or, emasculating the power of the large countries in favor of a UN, one government kind of thing. I mean, that's all in his speeches. In fact, one just given in October last month. But in '99, so his early versions of the 2030 program, it was called the UN Development Program. So that's what he did when he was in the UN. And then also what is called the Millennium Program. So this was another of these early programs to, globalist programs to form, one single government tied in with the banking situation and to work against. Now he got into some trouble with Bolton, which makes it which is kind of interesting, because if you remember when Bolton became the ambassador to the UN in the United States, he was, everybody was getting on his case because I think the first thing he said was that the UN should be eliminated, right? But he's not wanting to eliminate it for the reasons that we would want to eliminate it. It was basically, the Bolton and the PNAC group wanting unilateral United States rulership of the world, as opposed to this guy wanting, UN one world government rulership of the world. So that was really, to me, the what was going on. It wasn't like, Bolton gives a shit about the United States or anything like that.
Right.
And the other thing I really want to bring out is this group that I'd never heard of or barely heard of before, called the International Crisis Group. Have you heard of that?
No, let's do this. Let's see if we can get a visual on them. So why don't you go ahead and start talking about it? And I'll see if I can
right. So you're going to love it. So the International Crisis Group was founded in '94. The two founders are Malloch Brown and George Soros. Right. And their goal is to shape international perception of the causes and solutions to crises, real or fabricated, advocate solutions that remove sovereignty in military and judicial affairs from sovereign nation states. So in other words, and the other part, so in other words, they're going to, it's another version of problem, reaction, solution, right?
Right. It's a Hegelian dialectic agency.
So, but what you do is, so they're the ones, and I guess,
and of course they're headquartered in Brussels.
Okay, it was Brussels, yeah. So the idea is, you create the crisis, then you have to shape the perception of it. So remember all the stuff with COVID, the whole what is it, the agenda to the 2010 what was it, the group, the big conference the big conference that predicted all the COVID stuff.
201,
Agenda 2 lockstep. In
other words, but everything was set up beforehand. And one of the things that if you were given videos of that conference was, how do you control the media? How do you control what people think about it? So this has been going on a while. So 25 years ago, Soros and this guy got together, founded the International Crisis Group in order to advocate solutions that removed sovereignty and military and judicial affair from sovereign nations. In other words, so we don't want solutions. So if the United States has a problem, we don't want solutions that the United States is going to solve.
Right.
We want solutions that the IMF, that the UN, and other places are going to solve.
Right.
So and then but in order to do that, like again with the COVID, we have to make the COVID real. We have to make everybody think it's real, and we have to have people clamoring for these large institutions to take over and do what the United States isn't doing, what they think they're not doing.
So they want to create a global problem so that they could have a global solution.
Yep.
Right. So these are some of the past directors. It's probably on that page somewhere, but
yeah, you have Sandy Berger, Stephen Solar.
Frank Giustra, our old friend, Frank Giustra.
Frank Giustra, right. Mr. Lionsgate, yeah.
Right, who gave the house to the Royals. To the Royals when they went puttering off to the United States.
Meghan
and Harry.
Yeah, Frank Giustra is the Astana guy, the Kazakhstan guy, right?
Yeah, and he was involved in that, and of course, a huge, Clinton buddy. All right, the big new Brzezinski. Okay, what a surprise there.
Right.
Wesley Clark.
Wesley Clark.
I remember that name, but I don't.
He was the guy. He was the general. And he was the hot ticket for a while because he ran for president, and basically Wesley Clark said, he let it out of the bag. It said that they were going to essentially overturn the governments of Libya, North Korea, Syria, and Iran, or something like that. Like it's a famous video where he's
the 6 FINAC countries before we went into Iraq. He said it was on the table from the first meeting he was at with the administration, and then he was booted.
Yeah.
A guy named Francis Patton, Patten, who's another member of the Pilgrim Society, and you're going to love it. So he was the chair of the BBC Trust, right? And he left the BBC because he got in the hot water. He was basically the person who was covering at the BBC for Jimmy Savile. So we connect. With your last show.
Wasn't Phil Collins creepy? That video.
Oh, it was unbelievable. So he's part of this group. Viktor Pinchek, who's a Ukrainian oligarch. George Soros, his son Alex, Larry Summers.
Oh,
I'm going to save someone for last. Malloch Brown, Richard Armitage from PNAC, Project for New American Century. Kofi Annan.
Yep.
And Samantha Power.
Of course, yeah.
Wow, Samantha Power.
Power. Keep your eye on her.
Yeah,
she's the wife of Cass Sunstein.
Right. Well, that's another person you get into. So he's real involved in all this too. Well, you could if you know, but so I'll just say. So isn't Samantha Power Biden's pick for National Security Advisor?
Probably.
I'm pretty sure about that. I didn't double check on it.
Yeah.
Right. She's a complete, Kissinger acolyte.
She is bloodthirsty. When you look at some of her positions and her, it's almost like she's overcompensating for the fact that she's a woman in some ways. You know what I mean?
Well,
right. She's got to be like the meanest. Go ahead.
Do you see that? I mean, we talked about it last time too. It's the women get into power. It used to be back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when I was thinking, oh yeah, if only the women could take, control of power and we'd have so much peace in the world. They're the worst. They're the worst.
Well, yes. I think there's this idea that they have to overcompensate. And I think archetypally, there's something that's cut loose when not all women, by the way. I don't want to put everyone in. But,
I don't put myself in that category, but oftentimes.
A particular woman, when they get into power, there's kind of this archetypal, almost possession that can occur. And I don't always see it as being, lofty or statesman-like. Like maybe somebody like Benazir Bhutto might have been something like that, right? Graceful, kind of stately, whatever.
Right. So she was killed.
It's not like it's impossible, but what we see is this overcompensation, and frankly, in many cases, these women aren't even women. A lot of these women are really men that are masquerading as women. So then you got a whole different dynamic going on. Oh, absolutely.
Well, remember how they were toting Jacinda of New Zealand?
Yeah,
as this wonderful mother and all this sort of stuff.
Perfect
They're touting her femininity so much, and she's turned out to be the hardest ass of all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Whitmer, when you look at Whitmer, my goodness.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and you get Janet Evans or whatever her name is, the Evans governor from Maine. I mean, she's taken on this one restaurant in Maine. And they basically send the health inspectors there every day. The guy's got 60 pages of legal docs. He's been on Tucker Carlson. I mean, they're just cruel and sadistic, and
it breaks your heart.
Not a thread of anything that we would really like connect with as a feminine spirit, right?
Right.
This is not fair.
Or compassion.
There's no nurturing. There's no compassion. There's no empathy. I mean, they're all just really, the worst version of Kali Ma that you can imagine.
That's right. But Kali Ma her mission was very different.
I said the worst version.
I know. Yes, you did. You did. Yeah. But it makes me think again, going back to Max Spears, and at the interview I saw with him, and he just said it so heartfeltly. He said they want to break your heart, and he said it wistfully. It's just like, this is what they did to him, before they killed him. But that's what they do. They want to break your heart.
Oh, it's Janet Mills, and James says Janet Mills is his neighbor. That's interesting. Yes. Somebody says that the stream might have just gotten cut off in Canada. I don't know about that.
What might have gotten
the stream?
Really?
Yeah,
really?
Yeah. Okay. All right. What else you got?
I got a bunch of things, but he was also involved with the Rose Revolution in Armenia. Mm-hmm. All right, and that was another thing. And if you remember when that happened, John McCain was jumping up saying we're all Armenians. That was the thing then. And basically, Smartmatic in the last 10 years has been in the midst of election fraud in all sorts of countries. And so he's the CEO of that. And this is all in the service of one world government through the UN.
Doesn't Smartmatic sound like some kind of KTEL shit or
exactly Papa I had the Papa-Matic was in Parcheesi.
Right? Yeah. It's like, get your vote rigging, Smartmatic by Ronco.
So I think I think we got the picture of this guy. I don't want to give him too much.
So what he is a major hub. He's a major hub when it comes to this vast network of being able to create regime change, manage perception, and actually physically change, alter votes in the course of an election, and more than likely control the flow of information afterwards. So this is a major player.
He's involved in all this, and this is
quiet behind the scenes.
Yeah,
and and God bless Aim for Truth. They're the ones who brought it to our attention. Mm-hmm. That his role that he plays. Can we go to the video clip and show the movie they made about him?
I think that's all I need to say about this. I think people got the picture.
We'll do the video clip before we bring Ayana on. That'll be the last thing we do.
Okay.
What I wanted to bring to people's attention is what you and I talked about just before the show.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of mind-blowing shit, I gotta say. All right, I gotta find this thing. Yeah, she's being a pain.
Oh, is that Rosie?
It's a Rosie tail.
It's a Rosie sighting.
Yeah, she is.
Hi, Rosie.
She comes up here when she wants to eat.
Does she like a flippy fish?
No, the flippity more so I think than Jasper. Jasper was a little freaked out by it.
Yeah, so was Chen.
The flippity fish is a little imposing.
It's the noise, I think. Makes a weird noise.
Well, it's quite large too. Okay, so this is what happened so we have the CCTV cams that were set up in Georgia, and it shows that they bring in this table, and then underneath the table they have what looks like briefcases of ballots just sitting there. Okay, now This is the place where they supposedly had the break in the water main. All right.
Yes.
Right.
Well, let's connect the two of these
Which
things.
never happened.
That
Now,
no one ever sent out to fix.
Now, there's a woman named Ruby, and she plays a kind of prominent role. She's very observable. She's wearing purple, right? And she's got a fairly large and distinct hairdo. Okay, so I'm going to play just a couple of video clips here from her, one of which she's actually done herself while being inside of the place where they're counting the ballots. This will flip your wig. All right, check this out.
Oh my God. I want to turn around. Hey everybody. Yeah, you know, I just got back yesterday after 10 days and I had just got tested. Hold on. Baby girl.
She's
you
periscoping
okay?
live.
Breathe. Sniff.
Look at that. This woman is having a hard time with the goddamn mask.
Really?
Yeah, just breathe.
Oh, breathe.
Sniff.
Breathe that bacteria.
Let's keep going.
You don't need no asthma pump. You okay, baby?
Oh, yeah, right.
Wow.
The voters registration,
Really?
yeah, they had a scare. Hey, they had a scare at the warehouse, so we all had to get tested again. Yeah, so we getting tested for COVID, and I got 50 million ballots. Y'all know I work 7 days a week, 12 to 13 hours a day with my other baby girl. I don't see her. You know, I got little baby girls out here. I have to. Oh, Keisha. I ain't got but two out here. She handling like a champ. Okay. I love you, sweetie. See you. Okay, yeah. So, time to go back to work. Get the ballots done. Oh, my God. It's not that bad. It is that bad, though. Don't let your nostrils be dry. Because you will burn up.
So
hey.
She's live streaming from the place where they're counting the ballots.
Hey. Yeah, so we're here.
And she's pushing a cart with something.
Registration and election. Fulton County, downtown ATL. Yeah. So, yeah, I got here at 5:45. I'll leave about 7 or 8. Hey, Dion. You know, right. See, we are, right. Thank you. When you get the testing, you have to move it from your nose. And then after the testing, you got to be able to breathe. I mean, because it's, okay, I get my little steps in, so I'm going to get the steps. Oh, my God. Yeah, they say this self-testing. I said, oh, no, not for me. I'm in the wrong line then. No, I definitely can't do it by myself. Really? Stick that thing in your nose and twirl it 3 times. That ain't going to happen.
All right, so there's another video here. Watch this.
Thing in your nose and twirl it 3 times. That ain't going to happen. So I let them do it. Yeah.
This is not the one wearing the purple, though.
What's going on? How are you? Yeah. So, I got a lot of work to do, y'all. So, I'm working 7 days a week. But I'm getting it done. I was out for 10 days. Because I ain't like the way things were going. So, I just said, yeah. Anywho, I'll see y'all when I see you. But I'm back. Ready to work.
I didn't like the way things were going.
Watch this.
Okay, don't say nothing. Listen, look.
These are all mail-in ballots.
Don't say nothing. Look.
Look at this. Wow. Look at that.
Oh, Lord.
And this is where she's going to count them.
So that's what's going on in Fulton County. Voters registration. Sir, can I have some work? It's been 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Uh-huh.
That's all you give me.
I ain't going to give you but 5. I come to work, y'all. And they talk about me. Oh, they talk about me. I don't care.
This is where the ballots are
I didn't
counted.
want to work. Oh, Dion, thank you. Thank you, love. When I didn't want to work, I took off for 10 days. Now I'm back at work. Give me some work. Because I come to work. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Oh, you're going to give me... Oh, you just
Here they are.
God bless you real good. Thank you.
I want to give you 2. I ain't trying to overwork you.
Overwork. Ain't no such thing. I'm going to be here till 7 o'clock. Okay. Y'all see all this I got to do? I got to do all this. Enter all these absentee ballots.
Don't mind Miss Ruby.
Whatever.
So essentially, there's no observers. There's no witnesses there, right?
No.
There's nothing there. And it looks to me like there's a lot of questions about all those boxes that are just hanging out in that room. Now, here's what's interesting is that, so in the CCTV cam, people were actually able to zoom in on the material, and they actually found a purse with her name on it.
Right.
And then they were able to trace that back to her online store. And now all of a sudden they know, who this person is. They know who her daughter is, right? And not only that, but she started this company in August of 2020. So, could there be a connection with startup capital and the work that she's doing? I mean, these are some of the things that people are talking about. And what you guys and I talked about prior to, hitting record today was the fact that this was all uncovered by citizen journalists, right? This is this wasn't the FBI or the DOD, DOJ or the NSA. These were people going around and looking into, who this person is and what they were doing, and actually being way more effective than these alphabet agencies have been for a very long time. So the idea here is that we have Ruby in Fulton County, Atlanta, sort of being the end point for Lard Malik Brown, right? Right? This is the strange configuration of the universe that we're in. And, so starts with theoretically him at the top of this pyramid or hierarchy, and it goes all the way down to this woman in Fulton County who is putting in 10 hours a day doing the work, right?
It's what they call useful idiots.
Right. And if you look at the video, the closed camera TV, where her purse, I mean, it's almost like product placement.
It is
product
placement.
Right? It's like she knew where the cameras were.
And people are congratulating her. Great placement, Ruby.
Yeah, they were totally congratulating her.
That's right.
And
smart cookie, Ruby.
There was another thing. Oh, there's another video. So her daughter is in there. And there's another video where it looks like her mother is passing her a thumb drive in her hand, and you can see her pocket it and then walk away. So I think it's pretty safe to say that most of the major polling places in what we would call the battleground states were armed and operated by the opposition. Like they had their people embedded completely, so that if they needed to, they could switch things around any way they wanted to, and they would have compliance. Ayana's here, but before she comes on, there's one other thing. Did you guys watch any of that stuff from Michigan yesterday by any chance?
Yeah, I watched some of it. Yeah.
Did you see the woman who said that she worked for Dominion, talking with the guys who were being very dismissive of her? Did you see any of that?
Just, I've watched so many that they're all a blur.
It's a very clear. It's a very clear thing. It's a very clear exchange. The woman looks like she might be a little buzzed, but I'm not going to hold that against her. Then she says that I worked for Dominion, and she was going through everything and just basically, doing a Muhammad Ali on these guys. And then she said to this one guy, she said, I signed an affidavit and I took an oath and I pledged that if I'm lying, that I could be imprisoned or worse. And then she said, did you? And and the guy has nothing to say. Absolutely nothing.
Oh, yeah. He was just like this wishy-washy. He was terrible. Yeah, I did see a little bit of that. Yep.
There's so many testimonies, and it's like, good Lord, it makes your head spin.
And the bar plays on.
They've got more.
Bar plays on.
Well, so I think that show's coming in real quick. Let's give people a quick little 1 minute and 52-second.
Sorry, Ayana.
Great intro for Ayana. Yeah, it's from a 1914 Italian film.
Yeah, this is the cinematic portrayal of Malloch in all of its
Why do you have that name?
Glory. Here we go. The Temple of Malloch. Malloch, of course, being the demon that is the recipient of child sacrifices. Flaming, burning child sacrifices. Here we go. I don't have the volume up on this. There's Malloch right here.
You could chant. You could beat some drums.
They made a replica of that statue and put it in the Colosseum last year.
Which Colosseum?
The Roman Colosseum. The Pope.
Leo Zagami was outraged. He had a show on it last year.
Look at this. Look at this.
Yeah. Just the enormity of this set.
You have to wonder, are they really like burning babies here?
It's got a big light in there anyway. Yeah, I mean, but the kid actors are scared shitless. You can see either way.
That's a pizza oven. Sigurd says, "No, that's a pizza oven."
Look at this thing.
Yeah.
So they actually did make an exact replica of it last year, and it sat for about a year.
I don't know. It might still be there. We're not sure.
I think it's somewhere else now. But
seen enough of that. Jesus. I mean, the image of the kid kicking his legs, that's really not
right. But if you go, in the 10-minute version I sent you, they do save some kids and run off, and there's a chase scene, but it looks like it's a depiction of the Punic Wars, and it's kind of like it's one of the propaganda in the Roman times to get people to fight that war was to talk about this going on in Carthage, and I believe this is after the war. They salted the entire
the fields,
the entire city and the fields and everything, like to make it just ruin it.
Yeah.
So anyway, so let's bring Ayana on anyway. So.
Yeah. So Sigurd has the snarky chat comment of the day. Now that's a pizza oven.
Yeah, that's what you said. Yeah, I just heard that off. Yeah.
Let's bring Ayana on.
Hey. There she is. Hi. Look at you.
Good to see you all. Thank you so much for having me today, Robert. I'm excited to be here.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. And, I didn't really mean to have such a traumatizing segue, but,
That's okay. I mean, it's the eternal battle for good and evil, light and dark, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Steve and Chris have been singing praise after praise after praise about you personally. And of course, they have a book that you have written, and it's an interesting book. And I'm going to be straight up. I haven't read it, but that's why they're here, right?
But there's still time, Robert.
There is still time. But ostensibly, it's about your relationship with your father, who is a very interesting character, and a lot more. So I'm going to let Steve and Chris, really dialogue with you on that part. But I do want to let people know that in addition to you being an author and a mother, you're also a wife, and you are the wife of Jordan Foltz, who's been on our show a couple of times. And we love him. He's fantastic. And so
we do too.
Yeah. And so we found out how Steve swashbuckled his way into Chris's life. How did you and Jordan meet, and what was that like? And what was your takeaway when you first met Jordan?
Right. Well, big question. Right away, I knew when I saw Jordan that I was encountering some very special human in this world. And we met at work. We both worked for the local newspaper here in Asheville, North Carolina, the Mountain Express, our independent alt-weekly newspaper. And I was just coming on board in my second incarnation at the paper, my first round as a writer and editor and calendar editor. So kind of data entry, but also contributing writer for arts and entertainment. I took a break from that, traveled some, actually finished part of this book, and then came back to Asheville and started again in marketing and advertising and sales. So went back to the paper, said, is there an opportunity for me here? And they said, well, in a whole new realm, yes. And I said, well, I believe in this paper. So I think that at the core, if I believe in this mission, then I can sell it and build, advertising campaigns within it. And so Jordan had been recently hired in that same position in marketing and sales at the paper. So I walked through an office space with 3 desks, and he was the one closest to the door. And as I walked by him, I paused and just stood there, and he rolled his sleeve up and focused, frantic typing, just focused at his computer.
Was he aware that you were there? Was he aware that you were there?
I mean, I just stood there long enough for him to notice that I was there.
Right. So do you think the rolling up the sleeve was kind of like a male thing?
No, he was that's just genuinely.
That's genuinely him. He's just intense and focused.
Yeah, he's an extremely authentic person. That's who he is. It's just, he was in a flow. I just remember it because it was part of my first impression of some, small gesture that he still does. But I stood there until it was somewhat awkward. And then he finally looked over and I said, hi. And he said, hi. And I said, I just wanted you to know that I'm here now. And he was like, okay. And I said, great. And then I just kept walking.
So I've always felt like with women, they usually make a decision in about the first 10 seconds with a man, usually. Not always, but usually. And everything after that is kind of the unfolding of a script in some ways. And you kind of had that feeling with him, even though maybe you couldn't articulate it or, kind of model it, but you certainly had a visceral experience with him.
Right. His frequency, his presence, is something I felt immediately. And I believe we all carry a frequency with us, right? So peace, frenetic, manic, whatever it is in that moment. And he had a really powerful, focused frequency. And I just felt something. I joke with him that I knew I loved him from the beginning. And he was like, well, you didn't even know me. You didn't know my soul. And I was like, well, I just knew there was something there to discover. And we worked together as colleagues and friends for 2 years, just, seeing each other every day at the office as colleagues, and then eventually as friends, and then eventually as, a dating partner, and then mother of his children and more, so we grew that friendship over time, and then that partnership over time. But it's been a remarkable, beautiful journey. I feel so grateful to have him as a partner. And I think that this family structure that we have between the two of us is something that will always keep us grounded and focused, and really, build towards what really matters in life from home out, coming always back to the things and the people that we love the most is each other, our children. And then from there, that expands out to our neighbors, our community, our friends, but it always comes back to that bond at home. So I feel very grateful.
Yeah. So what was it like to go from, a really wonderful friend working relationship to crossing that line and, being more intimate and more serious? Because a lot of people will hesitate. They'll kind of stop there and say, well, I don't want to ruin this great friendship. Or, how did you negotiate that?
Well, everything just progressed slowly. He had something that he said to me very early on about the house, not building a big house too soon, because then you stand in an empty house with no furniture and no paintings and nothing on the wall. So we would build our house slowly with time and memories and sharing. So we built every piece of this house, which is our relationship, slowly over time, and built trust slowly. So I don't think anything happened quickly. And in part because, he has a daughter who's 11, who is my stepdaughter. So, very responsible father who wanted to take that role of me in her life very seriously and carefully, because that bond between us was going to be really important for him to move forward as well. So, that brought about a pace of its own, and showed me deeper aspects of him, which is really, child first, and then the rest of his life. And then that's still the way of the world with our children. It's the children first. And that's kind of built us in our partnership, our perspective. So nothing really happened too fast there.
No, but there's that line though. It's like we were getting along so well. Do we really want to spoil this friendship, right? And then some people will just keep it like that, but other people will evolve past that. And did you ever encounter that and say, okay, well, we've been doing this for 2 years now. Should we just go ahead and go deeper? And was there any hesitancy on either of your parts?
It kind of just felt like the doors opened for each other at the same time, and there wasn't any reason to hesitate. There wasn't reason to pause or overthink. It really does feel like life opened doors, and we were able to just kind of flow into something else.
Now, Steve stole Chris from another man. So, was there I'm just messing around there a little bit. He's nodding his head. I did, but it was
in a very surreptitious Gemini way.
But it was a very appropriate. It was a very appropriate operation that Steve was.
Stole you fair and square.
You did.
Right. Were you and Jordan involved in a relationship with other people at any point during this time? I'm curious.
Not as partners or dating. No, we were absolutely, clear to start that together. But when we first met in the 2 years that we were colleagues, we were both in other relationships.
You were in other relationships.
Right. And then we were just colleagues and friends.
Did you guys ever talk about your relationships with the other person together? Did you guys ever process that stuff?
Not really. I mean, we really had a professional relationship up until, doors opened and we could kind of have more of a friendship. He was always a trusted friend and colleague. I did give him a draft of my book early, but it didn't really go to the realm of our interpersonal relationships. It was about our writing, our ideas, the story I was working on, the story he was working on, the genesis of a new idea at the paper, which client was giving us hell. It was more about the dynamics and the emotions of our professional realm that brought our thinking minds together and built that kind of connection intellectually.
Right.
So we never really did, go.
So it seems like everything just kind of descended from sort of this higher plane coming through the mind and bonding with ideas and communication, then ultimately viscerally and physically with the body. That's a really nice story. How long have you been together now?
It'll be 7 years in April.
7 years. Now, we've had an opportunity to talk to Jordan a couple of times, and, we've talked a little bit about his evolution spiritually and personally and politically. And I would assume that he's a different person than he was 7 years ago. And then so are you, I'm assuming as well. Can you talk a little bit about how both of you have evolved and kind of created this meeting of the minds with where you are now? Because he's done a pretty serious 180 in his thinking. And I would assume in order to be in a partnership with somebody like Jordan, that you would have to do something similar in some ways in order to accommodate that major pivot.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true. He's changed a lot. I think he's changed more than I have, but I know I've changed and grown significantly as well. I think that Jordan, one of his best friends came to visit when we were early in our relationship and said that Jordan's capacity for growth is beyond anyone he's ever met before. So that kind of gave me a little bit of a foreshadowing to him in this realm. He grows, he chases ideas. He does also naturally question the mainstream narratives going around us. He always has, even though that narrative has changed now more what some people would say would be drastic or say different from who he was. But it's really the same questioning that he always has brought to the table, and in that regard, there's been not that much change because he's consistent in his vigilance and the way that he's thinking about mainstream, what I think he calls mob think or group think, right? So when he sees big trends and patterns, he's more cautious and questioning and inquisitive by nature. And so that hasn't changed at
Right,
all.
right.
If anything, I think that's what's given him, new eyes to see. And I think there was one point when we were sitting down for dinner where he said, my political ideas might be really different from yours. And I was like, okay, well, didn't really know what he meant there, but knew he was going through some kind of transformation or search was beginning. And then he started to do a lot of reading. And that's when our library, we really need some more bookshelves. We have half of his books at his mom's house and half at our house. And we have a small home, but his books are crisscrossing, because he's really been doing a lot of reading the past few years and changing his thinking, but going to history to do so. So that's kind of, who he always has been, right? So nothing really has changed. So the foundation of who he is and his essence has always been this man that I love and am with.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
No, but I don't know if that answers your question. So that hasn't been that much of a change, but yes, in society and in relationship with others, yes, that's been, big changes. Perception of him being suddenly different in those around us has changed more than who he is. But at the same time, in investigating these ideas and new books and new histories, new ideologies, and new understanding of this world and politics, he has made changes, kind of moving away from some of the feminine masculine more towards an embodiment of more of a masculine nature. And that is also always been there in him. It's just kind of flourishing in a way where maybe he focused on the more yin inside of his masculine, like music and art, but now it's more study, history, buildings, building with stone, carpentry. So those skill sets in him are shifting as well as a little bit of that energy. But hope Jordan, when you watch this, that I'm saying all of this with so much love and admiration for who you are, and I hope I'm not sharing too much.
No, so I think it's really interesting that you made a distinction around that you connected with his essence, right? It was the essence, and it wasn't necessarily the point of view or the shift politically that was the thing that was going to determine how you would relate to Jordan. And this is, I think, a really interesting point, because what happens, I've found in many relationships with my work with astrology, is that, and I know that your mother is an astrologer too, maybe we can talk a little about that, but that people, when they're in relationship, sometimes a partner will change, and it will be a very polaric kind of experience. And in many cases, the relationship, it's a real challenge to that relationship. But you seem to have been able to navigate that because you know who he is, and that was just kind of a part of his evolution. Is that true? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with Jordan. I love my community, my family, everyone in my inner circle, right? But at the end of the day, it's us. And he's so smart and perceptive, and when we share ideas, it's like I see exactly what he's seeing, and it makes 100% sense. So when he explains these ideas and why, I just see the path that he's seeing, right? But I haven't done that research myself, but I see it before us as if it were from the same eyes. And I do see his soul. And, at the end of the day, he's still that same inquisitive, perceptive, questioning human, and that hasn't changed. And, I wonder sometimes if people are so caught up in the names or the brand, right, that they would say, something like Steve and Chris have said, that community is impacted by the names that we say, the brands that we wear, or the brands that we identify with, right? Would it be fair to say, Steve and Chris, that you've been impacted by community that's judged you on those brands, right? Whether or not you think a certain way now or express certain ideas now that are contrary to the ideas or the politics of others, that's caused some conflict with even some of your deepest friendships?
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. No, you go.
Well, we've been impacted, but impacted emotionally. We haven't been, because none of those things have ever challenged what we thought or how we see, because no one has ever come up with anything to counter, and if someone had something to challenge, we would listen to it, and say, all right, well, that doesn't look right, and we'll tweak it or play with it. So most of it has just been, it's like somewhere in my book, it's just like this overweening grief that we feel. We feel for everything. We feel for the loss of Western civilization. We feel for the loss of the greatness of the human, and it's just part of that whole thing. So it's just a grief that we just keep on going through and going through. So that's my takeaway. I really haven't had much of what I thought challenged, in a way that, made me rethink it,
I think what we ended up doing was challenging ourselves and challenging our own presuppositions that we held as truths. And they seemed to be so real when we were espousing them. But then the more research we did and the more, conversations we would have, like with you and Jordan and anyone who would listen, the more we realized that, we needed to really upgrade and admit that we had been wrong about a lot of things, and that in that ignorance, we were arrogant, and that we had to admit and cup to that, but we lost some friends because of it. We did.
And so I guess my question too is then, do you think your frequency, like who you are in essence, changed, even though your ideas changed? I would argue that it hasn't, and that you two are still acting and creating out of that same heart center. Chris, with your garden and your flowers and your magic and your potions, and Steve with your writing, and you're opening a porthole for so many other voices to come in, and both of you doing so together with Logo Sophia, that even though there have been new thoughts, right, new changes, new critical thinking, the essence of who you both are the same, rooted in that something bigger than what the thoughts are, what the names are, right? So in that, I wonder if people can tune into their closest friends and hear their thoughts, but still know that they're that same person that they've always loved is there, right? And so in that sense, we could maybe exchange ideas without losing the people that we love so dearly. And I think that that's something that's been causing pain for Jordan too, more so than me, because he's so much more outspoken, right? He's sharing kind of.
Yeah, he's on the bleeding edge with some very unpopular ideas for a certain group, genre, portion of society, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So to all of those friends that think that he's done a 180, I want to tell them that no, like that's the same man that they loved to begin with, right? His capacity for growth is huge, but that foundation spark is that same. And so in that regard, I wish it were easier for people to sit down and have a conversation without it being, I don't know if that's making it.
Well, I think it gets all tangled up in language and language as a distraction, not as an elucidator of truth, but language as a distraction hides the truth of who we are as human beings. And there's this linguistic overlay that is separating people. It's been used against us. And so I think that, that's what namaste means. When you put your hands together in namaste, it means I honor the divine in you. I see that we are essentially the same, that there is no separation, there is no difference. It's all a story. It's a story about who we think we are, that we make up, we make up this biography. So, I think that's what gets in the way. And then you overlay all of this political lies on top of everything else, and it just becomes a worse wedge in between people to push people apart. But yes, that essence of who you really are is always there. And hopefully if you're grounded in that knowledge, that's what comes through, as you're saying, isn't that person who you always were, isn't that still there, and can't we access it? I think we need to, open up that box and say, that's a much larger picture of who we really are. Not so much the personality, but once all of this passes away, when all of that language falls back into silence, it comes out of silence, it is, and then it goes back into silence. Every word I speak comes from silence and dies in silence. And that's the base of who we are. So once we realize that all of this is just the dross on top, and it's just a story we tell ourselves about who we are and what we are and what's going on, that all falls away.
It's really, I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, that's all.
Well, this is really interesting because before the show, I watched about a 5-minute, 6-minute blip on Bobby Fischer, who I think is one of the most interesting people of all time. And Bobby Fischer was this amazing chess champion, right? And then at some point, all of a sudden, he starts to go really hardcore on Jews, right? He goes really hardcore on Jews. And just so happens that Bobby Fischer is Jewish. He has a Jewish mother, and as a Jewish father, he was still very close to his mother. His father was a well-known physicist in Poland, and he found that out later. And people were shocked, right? They were like, oh, Bobby Fischer's an anti-Semite. Bobby Fischer is mentally ill. Bobby Fischer's this and that. Bobby Fischer was probably, to your point, the same person all along, right? But what he was doing is that he was seeing the global chessboard and interpreting it through his own experience, from his own personal experience and through his own culture. And they were saying, well, he was sick. He became, essentially enchained by a mental illness. And I would say that part of him was always there, but it was something that at some point got extracted and separated him out from everybody else who either lionized him or wanted to, or were afraid on some level to actually listen to what he was having to say. But that's an extreme example of that, right? It's a very extreme example. But I think, to your point, I think it's very true what you're saying, and that maybe that would be the most difficult thing, would be able to have people wrap their head around that what he was talking about. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about you. Jordan's a big personality. He's a I think he's a real superstar, and you grew up with a very big personality as well. And I'm going to let Steve and Chris kind of take over here and do a little intro about your book, how they met you, and then you guys can sort of dialogue about your journey, what the book is about.
Well, yeah, well, just Ayana's book, to be short, because I really want to hear her talk about it, and the fact that I just looked at the date, so it's 2017, which seems like 1,000 years ago that we published it, and but so basically, it's actually a 3-part story. So it's a story of her grandparents in Poland in 1939. Your grandfather was hearing broadcasts of Hitler, and I think his German was good enough to know that something was up, right? And he just grabs the family and runs. So that's one story of your grandparents. Then the story of your father is conceived and born as they're running and making their way to Russia, or the Soviet Union at the time, right? So that's story number 2. So your father comes to you at some point and wants you to tell your story, and you've done some writing, I think, different work here and there, plus your work on the Mountain Express, but you've taken writing classes, if I remember correctly, right? And but the act of telling his story became so interesting and problematic that became the 3rd story. The 3rd story is of Ayana working with her father, who is trying to tell a specific story. Ayana is trying to tell the truth. Let's put it that way. And how all those 3 things weave into this book. That's what makes it magnificent, is how she's woven these all together. And she showed me a first version, and then the second version was just perfect. And and there's some amazing stories. And so anyway, that's I guess my introduction. Her father Does he still go by the name of Rabbi Yahu?
He doesn't. He's much
No.
more of a Moshe now.
Moshe?
Moshe.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know, you want to take it from there, say what you want to say. You can talk about the book or talk about, just start somewhere and then we'll play.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I thought I would read a few pages too, but I wanted to thank Steve and Chris because I could not have shared this story without them and the support. It was really such a hard story to write in some ways, so emotionally complex. I mean, really trying to heal many different wounds, right? To talk about and write and describe the wounds of my father as he was telling me his life story and experiencing deep grief in recounting it, right? So many chapters in which he's just crying as he's sharing this. So walking through his grief, seeing my father as, for the first time, as a woman seeing a man rather than a child, kind of in the shadow of his huge personality. And then really also trying to forgive those relationships of the father that was very difficult in some ways and very just larger than life, that I was very much shadowed by him and the complexity of him and the intensity of him and his emotions, especially when he got into a harder space, which as a child I didn't understand where those emotions came from. But then later, hearing his story, I could see where the deep pain and the trauma is rooted and where it comes from. And that he, carried that his whole adult life. And I just could not understand it as a child in the way that he expressed it.
Right. How could you?
And then later understanding and seeing him, forgiving him, loving him, and him also forgiving me. I mean, the story that I told was not the one that he had hoped to seek, because he was seeing his reflection as a lion, right? And I also showed the wounds that came into his life picture. It wasn't just the courage or the bravery, right? It was also the wounds, the trauma, the pain, the anger of all that is what makes him so captivating. It couldn't be just the solar, right? It had to be the darkness as well. The dark and the light within us all is what makes us fascinating, powerful, beautiful people, dynamic, real, whole. But he did not want to see certain aspects of himself reflected in that way. So carrying this story forward, if you can imagine the weight of that and also the relief of putting it into form and having it bound and then wanting to see it shared. And that's where Steve and Chris opened this possibility for me with Logosophia. So I feel eternally forever grateful for that, because I needed support. I needed mentors. I needed teachers to help me to carry that to the next level so it could be released. And I was large and pregnant with my first baby when we did the book reading. And so part of me felt like I could put these stories, share them verbally with the world as I was holding my bound book. This story, this trauma, this ancestral pain had a home, and it was no longer in my body, right? It was no longer left unresolved for my children to have to find the solution for. I could do as much internal work myself with this trauma, intense genetic trauma that my grandparents and my father really faced, embodied, and have been forever impacted by. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, because he was just born into this, right? He was born into this
in the thick of it.
And think about, what are my children born into now, with collective changes of mask wearing, of not connecting, seeing the loving smiles of adults in our world. So what are the generational cycles, right, that we're born into? What are those cycles to begin with? And then how that will impact our wounds, our insecurities, our sensitivities, our vulnerabilities, just that are part of more collective things, right? As well as then our parents and all of those layers. So really trying to make peace with a lot of my layers. And I thought I would just share a tiny bit about my father, sharing a little bit of his voice from the book. It'll take about 2 minutes, if that's okay. And it's just his introduction, because this is his story. And I am actually asking him to introduce himself. I hit record on the digital recorder I bought in preparation. Dad, if you were to introduce yourself to someone, to tell them about your life, what would you say? My father, in a thoughtful, playful voice, tells me this. Well, honey, I lost a few teeth along the way. Not a bad price to pay for this most magnificent life I have led. A life that really blows my own mind when I think back and remember my 6 children, my Jewish parents, the Shabbos candles I lit around the world, and myself, years ago and now, still handsome, timeless and immortal. Immortal? My soul is eternal, he says. Plus, I'm getting younger every day. My father laughs and grins a near toothless grin. Certainly, I expected life to be easier. However, I don't regret any of it. I wouldn't do some of it again now. Sugar once was plenty, really enough. My father looks past me, eyes falling to the branches of an old walnut tree beyond the window. I listen and let him take his time. From the Holocaust to bliss, he pauses, sucks air through his lips. But it wasn't until the early 70s, mainly through LSD, that I realized my life was going to change. And I had no idea where it would take me. That's when the model broke. The structure of society crumbled when I met my Mexican medicine man. He led me into new directions with a few drops on my tongue. That was after my first child, he says, remembering stroking his coarse, untrimmed beard. And I continued to search, to heal myself, to get free of the burdens of my upbringing as a Jew born into genocide. Did I lose my innocence along the way? Maybe. I sure did many things that weren't so innocent. He grins lordly and shifts beside me. I'm ready for something new. After many years of preparation, God knows, and I ain't waiting. His brilliant eyes flicker around the room, and I nod him on encouragingly. Everything is a big surprise when you have no routine, when you let the day evolve. He draws it out. That's what I do every day. I watch it unfold and I meditate on the light within, but I do it lying down, he adds with a smile. That's how the Jews meditate, to be comfortable. I laugh and listen. I sit in the sun and I process everything I have witnessed along the way. That's when I know that I am blessed and I'm ready to be blessed by God again. And I'm ready for the whole world to be blessed with joy. I give it my permission. So just a little glimpse into Dad, but in between that genocide and then that kind of LSD spiritual searching and healing, he was an academic and a professor at Harvard with Timothy Leary and had graduated from Columbia. So he had this intellectual revolution that then changed into a psychedelic reincarnation. So it went from, genocide, poverty to amazing mentors that brought him into academia, scholarship, his life as a psychotherapist, and then to the LSD intrigue of the 70s, to a free feeling, seeking healing, always being that kind of left a string of children behind.
Yeah, could you just give it like a timeline trajectory so people understand the scope of his life and what it encompassed? So starting out, the family is in Poland and how they're catapulted into Russia for the duration of the war, then come back, then go to Israel, Canada, Colombia, California.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating.
It's an amazing timeline. In some ways, it's kind of like the Jewish Forrest Gump, right? Like how many lives?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And it reads that way.
So, so many lifetimes in one. That first chapter, early childhood. So born in 1941, he'll be 80, and then his early life up until 16, kind of going from birth on the run to Russia, back to Poland, and then as first immigrants to Israel, right?
And even when they went back to Poland, how they were not welcomed and they had such a difficult time because of being Jewish, and how people were still so very prejudiced.
Right. And he,
right?
as a little
and everyone was gone, right? Everyone had died.
Right. So just to kind of slow it down, so he was born on the run, and my grandfather found work in Russia as a tailor, which is what he did in Poland. And they had a very affluent business in Poland prior to the war. They were doing very well. They owned property. He owned a thriving business. The family did not need for anything. And they had extensive family network. Of course, their family roots were deep in Poland for generations. And then he found work as a tailor for the Russian army, the Soviet Red Army. And he was working, my grandmother was living as a farmer in a kohot, like a poor farming community. And, no religion, but religion in secret, right? And then returning to Poland after the war. And she was very sheltered, my grandmother not recognizing what had happened over this period of time. My grandfather knew, which I'm sure he did not share what was happening. So for her, the devastation was real and physical on that return to Poland, where she realized there was nothing left and no one left to, return home to. So she goes into a mental breakdown. She becomes silent. She's, incapacitated, no longer able to mother or nurture or to take care of the children. They live in an orphanage for that year until my grandfather somehow, nurtures my grandmother back to health enough that they can reclaim their children. And they're at in a city in Poland during this time when they're reunited, brought back to a small apartment where they're living together. Then they, travel by train to Italy and then boat from Italy to Israel. And recently, just this past year, I actually had some history pulled from the Holocaust History Museum in Washington, D.C., and we found the records with the name of the ship that carried them
Really?
to Israel. Really amazing records that were kept. And then, my grandmother's, documentation from that time, and also documentation when they returned to Poland, documenting them as Jews returning back to Poland. So a registry of Jews returning back to Poland.
So it's very clear.
Was kept. And that's where you found my father, my aunts, my grandparents in that registry by name and by date of birth and by hometown before they left, and then where they were living
Give
now.
you chills?
I know, very, very. And then also what was so heartbreaking about that recent research that I did was that my grandmother was applying through the Red Cross for reparations in Israel with a lawyer through Red Cross, applying to Germany for reparations. They never did receive, but how sad, right? I saw that document. That's my grandmother saying that her life was destroyed and she would like some money to help her with this poverty that she's experiencing now. But how terribly painfully sad, right?
I think we should all get reparations from the Rothschilds, frankly.
Yeah. They've got the money. They could do it.
They fucked the world over with the Depression in the 1920s. We got jacked over again in 2008, 2009. I mean, let's just open up the reparation envelope here. Come on, let's go. Right. So that's a pretty intense story. Your father was a professor at Harvard. Is that true?
Yeah, and so he then, as a teenage boy, was under the mentorship of a Hebrew teacher who was helping him with English in Canada, where they ended up. And with his application to the seminary at Columbia and this recommendation by this individual with great esteem in the community, he was accepted to the Jewish Theological Seminary in Columbia, even though he could barely read English at the time and was very much behind academically. So then he's there, he's very far behind, but again, mentors, extreme figures in his life that are all told in the book, teachers, professors that step in and help him. They're like angels who are stewarding him to the next level of his career, one of which connects him to his next stage, which is his PhD at the University of Chicago, where he's studying child psychology. And then together he writes a piece that's called The Blatt Effect, which is my surname. It's about intellectual development, moral development in children based on ethical questions and moral dilemmas, that you can speed a child's moral developmental stages in that work. And so that's what brought him to Harvard, is that work that he did in his PhD. And then at Harvard, he was basically teaching that, the different stages of development in children and how moral dilemmas can then enhance and change a child's thinking. So to stay at home to take care of the sick and ailing father, or to go to college, these kind of dilemmas, when brought to children, change how the children behave and their understanding of the world. So he was teaching that, and then he opened a psychology practice of his own after teaching at Harvard. And he was a very influential psychologist. And most of the feedback I've gotten about the book from people who knew him were his clients, were his patients. So that's been really interesting, having people write to me who dad was their psychologist. So I think he had a big branch of people that he was working with in that realm that have found the book and written to me about that experience. So he was at Harvard with Timothy Leary during that era, right? He had dinner with Timothy Leary, a fun scene in the book where they're dining at the supper club at Harvard, dining on horse meat, horse steak. So interesting, strange dish. sharing.
Yeah, well, yeah, but we did a show on horse meat a couple months ago, and some very interesting things that go on with the horse before the horse is actually
Yeah.
served
Yeah.
up. So he knew Tim Leary and Dick Alpert, right?
I don't know how well he knew either. I know that this one encounter with this personal encounter with Tim Leary was the closest conversationally he got, but I do believe that he participated in some of the greater lectures, that he knew more about his work and his academic.
Was he living in Newton, Mass, by any chance?
No, I don't believe Newton. I think he was living centrally in Cambridge during that time.
Yeah. So he becomes a PhD, and he teaches at Harvard as well from there.
Yes, for a while, and then he opens his own practice as a psychotherapist, and he opens these retreats that are very much based on Gestalt therapy, and they're very emotional, and there are these big gatherings. He buys a piece of property in Maine where he holds the retreats that are like weekend-long retreats.
So when you say Gestalt, you're referring to the work of Fritz Perls, is that right?
Yeah, correct. Okay. And then he teams up with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And she and another rabbi called Zalman Schechter, who's larger in kind of Jewish reform, I believe, who basically said that he changed the rules about what it meant to become an ordained rabbi, and he's the one who ordained my father. And he basically said that in old world Jewish culture, any rabbi could create another rabbi, essentially do the ordination, and it shouldn't have to go back to the synagogue. It's really from the one embodied elder to
that
the
makes
next,
sense.
as rising up as the next rabbi. So when Zalman saw my father doing this work with the people who are terminally ill, with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, trying to help them in their last stages of life and help them to just accept and feel and grieve and love and emote, he said to my father, "You're doing the work of a rabbi, and so I will bless you in that work." And he performed kind of an unorthodox ceremony. But Zalman Schechter is kind of famous for that, I think, in the Jewish community, of kind of shifting that. And I don't know if
kind of reminds me of when Leonard Cohen became a Roshi in the Zen tradition. You can kind of go in a different direction. So your father has a break with that at some point, right? He has a break with academia, and then he goes off on a kind of a very different path.
Right, and that's the medicine man that was referred to in that earlier. He has a curandero in Cambridge who gives him a dose of LSD, right, and then a shot of ketamine at some point in the LSD trip.
That's one of the wildest scenes in the book.
It's a death rebirth, right? So it's like all of this elation and then this not moving because of the ketamine, and then
what year was this, by the way?
This has to be in the late 70s at this point, or mid 70s.
Right.
Mid 70s.
And weren't they? I'm sorry, but weren't they playing music? Not music, but sounds.
Yes.
Of troops.
Right. So
are you referring to Salvador? Are you referring to Salvador Roquette? This sounds just like Salvador Roquette. Salvador Roquette worked with John Lilly, who was in Massachusetts, and Salvador Roquette would take people who had Holocaust trauma and dose them in LSD and play like Hitler speeches and things like that.
That's what was happening.
That's Salvador Roquette. That's, I think, who your father was working with.
Right. And that's his Mexican medicine man, Salvador.
Yes, it's Salvador Roquette, who was a student of Maria Sabina, by the way.
Wow. Okay. So I haven't done as much research. So what I'm realizing too is that my father really touched hands with giants in history, right?
That's right.
Unbelievable giants. And the reason that I knew about even Zalman Schechter was because of the rabbi here, who was like, "You don't even know who this man is." And let me tell you. So the same with Zalman. He's probably, again, I'm touching on something that I need to do a lot more research on, in this man's role in my father's life was huge. But then it was Salvador, who kind of opened this new paradigm. And I don't think everyone else in the room was Jewish. I think it was a lot of people who weren't Jewish as well. But it starts with angels singing, angelic choral choir, like love and beauty. And then it changes into kind of what Dad says was a bum trip, right? Throws you into the darkness, and then kind of you can't move with the ketamine, and then you come back to life, and then all you have is gratitude for your life because you just went through some crazy shit, right? So that's when he said, what am I doing with the psychotherapy? Like, I think I'm helping people, and people don't even know. Like, people don't even know. Like, this is the real medicine, right? So then he travels with Salvador. He actually goes to Mexico with Salvador, does all of these kind of seeking expeditions for years. I think it's like 3-year chapter that he's in Salvador. And then that's kind of the drop out, right? From everything else. There's no more office. There's no more clock, no more clients. It's a whole new ball game.
Right.
And thankfully, in that chapter, Dad had done some very wise real estate investments that he's floated on for the rest of his life. From the money that he was making as an academic, really wise real estate investments that then liquidated and turned into what he continues to live on. So then he was kind of free, and he's set free. Then he follows Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh in
Osho.
It's just amazing.
And then, so again, touching hands again with another giant, just one after the other. I mean, from Hitler, right, to all of these different layers of history that's embedded into his being.
Gosh, Robert, you should do his chart.
By the way, yes, there's a reason why Ayana remembers my birthday.
It's the same birthday as my dad.
Oh, Steve. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay. So then he goes to study with Osho, but I don't think he ever really fell in fully with that, because he was the guru himself. So I don't think he liked to have another guru. He could see himself in that guru role. But he was there, and he was at the ashram, and then he came back, and he always had the sannyasins as part of his community.
So was that in Oregon? Did he go to Oregon to?
No, he was in India.
So he went
to Pune, right?
That's a very interesting time with Rajneesh. Have you ever seen any of the films or videos from?
I have.
Yeah, they're kind of mind blowing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's
big country.
So this is the 1970s, right? We're in the 70s, right?
Yes,
we're in
the 70s, late 70s when he's in Pune, right? So then we enter the 80s. And it kind of turns from seeking with Salvador to seeking with Osho to seeking with Rainbow, right? Rainbow gatherings, and kind of more hippie America. It shifts a little bit to that as a way of searching for tribe and community. And then Dad is kind of more in that realm around my birth in the 80s. But he's still he has a beautiful home in Massachusetts that he's bought late 70s, early 80s. That is it becomes kind of his commune. It's a beautiful home where I was born, and he hosts these Shabbat dinners, these Shabbos dinners, where people from all walks of life come together, break bread. We're cooking all day. At this point, this is where my memories come of my father, is him opening these doors, these grand doors, to anyone who, even if they're there just because they want a hot meal, or they're because they're Jewish, or they're there because they have connections to Dad from different eras. The hallway leading to the great hall is always just packed with people, so many people everywhere, and I'm sitting at his side, and he is the kind of the source of that connection, the prayer, the candles, the bread, the wine, the song, the tears, right? Because this is connecting him to his Jewish soul. So he's open and beautiful and vulnerable, and he's this guru of his own little world, and I'm his daughter there. I have every summer I spend with him. So I spend June, July, and August, 3 months of my whole life with him up until age 11, and that's where those childhood memories of him are forged. And
where would you spend the other part of the year?
With my mother in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
So back and forth between Brighton, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. And those were the whirlwind summers, the whirlwind summers of my childhood. And that's where we go to rainbow gatherings. We follow the Grateful Dead across the country. For one summer, we have all these epic adventures, as his daughter on our great adventures, right? So I'm seeing my dad through these like Technicolor glasses as a kid, and all of these different scenarios, very untraditional, nude beaches in Hawaii, all of these different places. But we also go to Israel, and he has this deep connection with his Jewish heritage and nature. And then we kind of have a break in our closeness. At the age of 12, I stopped going on my summer adventures with him. I go to high school in Massachusetts, but I'm not with him. I'm with my stepmother, a woman he remarried, and she takes me in. I go to high school there, and then I go to college, and it's like all of a sudden there have been years and years between us. And I feel like there's so much of our history that's been left unsaid. I feel like I don't even know him anymore when he calls and says, I want to tell my life story. And at this point, I was working as a writer in my first chapter at Mountain Express, right? That newspaper where this is before I met Jordan, before I come back in the sales realm. And I'm a writer there, and I'm really loving who I am as a writer. In college, I had started writing about Dad, kind of processing my feelings and my memories about who he is, but never really knowing him fully. So when he says he wants to tell his life story, I'm like, I want to write it. Like, I've already wanted to know who you are for so long, and come. And he shows up at my door straight from India. You know, he's got these torn, because he goes back to India again and again later in his life, just as a place that he loves, and where he actually was doing trance dancing for years after, you know, I grew up, after the chapter where
This Goa, right?
Goa, right, doing trance dancing, and that's always.
So he did the whole Goa scene.
Yeah,
That's
and
the thing.
And he
So
brought.
did he know this guy Goa Gill, the DJ Goa Gill? Have you ever met him?
I have not.
Okay, it's interesting.
But so he's in that chapter of his life when he comes to Asheville, and he shares this story with me. And that's where I really, for the first time, get to see who he is and why he is what he is. And, you know, I really kind of got to piece these pieces together for myself. And I start writing the book, and then I meet him in Thailand, where he's going back and forth between Thailand and India, because with his visa, he can only stay 6 months in one country, right? So he bounces back and forth. So I met him in Thailand with a draft of this book. And then that's where the third book that Steve talks about kind of comes into play, the conflict between my story, my reflection of who he is, right? And then what he wanted to see, what he had hoped to see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that all kind of falls apart in Thailand. And then I finish the book and I offer it as it is. But I feel very grateful because he accepts it, loves it. What happened really is that people read it, they love it, and they hug him and they say, I never knew. Like, can I hug you? And he's like, wow, what happened? They're like, I read your book. And
well, isn't it interesting how he kind of overcame that shadow side of himself through maybe seeing it in your book? Or I don't know if he overcame it, but at least, you know, that whatever you can call it, an aversion to that side of himself, which is why he rejected the book out of hand, you know, and in a certain sense rejected you with it for a while. But he's come around, and like you said, you know, every once in a while he wants another box. You know, I send it to, you know, I don't know, wherever he is in the middle of the ocean. But I think that's great. You know, that it seems like that you also offered him the opportunity to grow past all that stuff, you know, through witnessing it through your book.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I hope that he knows. I think there's just so much more beauty in it than there is any critical commentary. And
I agree.
Anyone, like, you know, when you've got all of this positive feedback, but then there's one critical note of feedback. I don't know if this is true for you, Robert or Steve or Chris. Like, we tend to hold on to the one bit of critical, right? So I feel like my father was just deeply sensitive, and he was holding on to those tiny moments of criticism, not even criticism, but observations of him that he was appalled by, that were included in the book. And he was forgetting, he wasn't seeing what was always there, which was this vast amount of love and respect that's there. It was just that I did include the true things that are hard. Like, yes, I was afraid of him when I was a little girl, but I'm not afraid
because he was so big.
Right. And I know who he is now, and I see that, but I just being truthful in the story of us includes things that were unpleasant for him to read. Unpleasant for him to read about what ex-wives have said or my siblings have said, because I'm one of 6 children and there's 5 different wives. Like, there's a whole string of things in that story that were really hard and rubbed the wrong way. But in the bigger picture is the story of a man who's deeply complicated, deeply beautiful, passionate, wounded, seeking healing his whole life, just trying to search for something to feel like there's beauty and love despite the pain.
You know, Ayana, when you talk about when your father came to Asheville and you spent that time together, it feels like it was a sacred container for this ritual that you were going through together, like the ritual of healing. And not that it was contrived at all, but that's what it actually was in essence. It was a ritual for you together to heal this tremendous wound that was just unspeakable.
It's a generational.
It was so intense in its agony. And how could you speak it out? But telling the story seems to be, that's where the healing is.
Well, what is this intense, agonizing wound?
What is in his intent? Well,
what is the intent? What are you referring? Like, what? I mean,
you have to read the book. You have to read the book.
Okay, all right.
No, well, there are parts in the book that are very intense, where he undergoes great suffering, and almost could be seen as a betrayal by the parents, where there's a certain something that has to take place.
I think you can keep that part a mystery for our readers, but yes, there's a great trauma that occurs from parent to child.
Yeah. Okay. So not to release that part of the book, but you really need to read it and to understand the extreme trauma that he went through.
Yeah, and the extreme trauma that my grandparents thereafter, like in imagining a full, healthy, robust life that's all taken away from you. You know, my grandmother, my grandfather had their home, had their business, had their loved ones all around them. To have everything destroyed and demolished, and then her grief also was like a secondary layer of trauma, let alone this one acute moment of betrayal, right, from her to him, but then also her grief upon a child. Like she grieved with him, he would no longer have the wisdom of his grandparents. My father, before he was, you know, even in a double digits age, was having nightmares about life because of the stories that she would tell him, trying to process the feelings that were being shared with a child, her grief to his child heart. So layers and layers and
layers and layers. And even when the family goes back to Poland and they're rejected and everyone's gone, I mean, that in itself is just the most, I think when you read it, you put yourself in the place of the people who are living it, because the way you unfold the story makes it so present that you feel like you're going through these experiences with this group of people. And I couldn't tell when I was reading the manuscript. I kept saying to Steve, well, this is a really good book, and I can't really tell, like, am I loving it because my family is, my father's side of the family is from Poland, and I'm just relating as a Polish ancestry, you know, is that why I'm liking this book so much? You know, is that what I'm relating to? But no, you really have to say it's a human story. I'm relating to it on a human level. The suffering initially that he was born into and experienced in his early years, and how that affected him as a man, and how he carried that. And I think the power of that suffering is what drove him into those internodal points with these great people who he met in his life, because he carried such intensity. He was like a magnet. He attracted intense people to him, or he found intense people to express his magnitude, because the man is a magnum. He is a magnitude. He lives life on the outer edges in its fullest and doesn't hold anything back.
He's going to be 80 in May, and he's in some ways alone. You know, I wish that he could have more community in his present life. There's a whole kind of another chapter after the book, but it's, you know, I just wish that he had more community and love around him every day, because it's an isolating world right now that we're living in, let alone being alone, not having a loving partner and having a home that's full. And so I'm grateful for him, but I also know that it's a lonely reality right now. So if people want to connect with him and they want to reach out, that my website, which is my name without the hyphen, just all one word, IanaCzakBlatt.com, at the very bottom, there's a recording by him of some Yiddish and Jewish Hebrew lullabies that he recorded for when I was pregnant with my daughter. And there's also his contact information. So if people read the book and they want to reach out and talk, he loves to connect. He loves to share. He wants to be like all of us do.
We should get him on the show. Let's get him on the show. I'll talk to him.
Oh my goodness.
That'd be fun.
Absolutely.
Oh, he'd love it. He'd love it.
Yeah. Let's bring him on. So, pardon me, let me interject just for a moment here. The conditions that you were describing about having their businesses taken away, that they were thriving businesses, and all of a sudden they have nothing and they're being relocated. It sounds like we're knocking right at that door right now, right? I mean, people are getting their businesses completely obliterated. Small businesses are shuttered. Right. Families' fortunes are having to be spent to keep their houses afloat. Like, we are theoretically, sort of going sideways into a new version of the Holocaust. That's what it feels like, along with all the fascist repression that seems to be being catalyzed right now. So your story and your recounting of your story seems to be a very timely one.
Well, it's definitely something that I have a lot of fear around in my home with my children. Mostly it comes back to my kids, right?
Sure.
So it's like, I have fear around what it means to be human and in community for them, because what I want for them is something that I will never give up on, and what humanity is, which is when they have friends and community come over and just hug on them and read stories and snuggle and smile and connect. And it's just been so difficult in the past. How long has it been now? Since March?
Yeah.
We're going into a really hard chapter where the kids in school, they're not going to play on the playground. They're not going to share their lunches.
Yeah.
They're not going to have friends. And it's painful to me to think that the fabric of humanity right now is being controlled so heavily of what it means to be human. Even going to the grocery store, they're not going to get to see, when someone's smiling at them because they're cute little girls, my children, they can't see that smile. And I want to fight against that with every fiber of my being. I really dislike that. And I don't want their teacher to wear a mask. I don't want them to be wearing masks. I don't want them to be living that way. And so we've taken them out of school. We're homeschooling as much as we can. I mean, our 11-year-old is in virtual school, and my 3-year-old, it's preschool at home. That's easy enough to do. Right now, it's going to get challenging though, as this goes on. And even if it doesn't, I just told them I'm just not going to send them to school if the school requires that the teachers and the kids wear masks, and they're hyper sanitizing that school with toxic chemicals. No way.
Right.
That's just not the environment, the humanity that I want. So I am scared, about that collective, what are we born into question again, what kind of generational fights are there to be had? My father was certainly born into a horrific time. There's a story that's not my father's story, but that continues to haunt me. I met a Holocaust survivor at Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust History Museum in Jerusalem. And he was telling his story to a group of Americans who were there for the tour of the museum. And he said this really tragic, terrible story. He was a Greek Jew. And at the time, there were signs about relocating the families to a different community. And the worst thing, most tragic thing is, so there was all this propaganda, right, around the Jews relocating the Jews to a different community. And they believed that it was actually going to be a relocation to a new home, to a new village, even though for generations they had been, Greek Jews. They were going to go. They were going to do this because that's what all the narrative was telling them to do, but that this man's father bought a ticket to Auschwitz.
Oh, Lord.
And so heartbreaking, but so terrifying. But we as a society have to constantly be on alert about what that narrative is to fight against it ever happening again.
That's right. That's right.
And then that is where there's a huge shift in Jordan, is his vigilance is high. Our family's vigilance is on high for he asked a question of, what is your line in the sand? What is it that's too much that you refuse to cross, right? Is that when they say mandatory vaccinations? What is your personal line, so that everyone defines that line for themselves and won't cross that line? And that question is open-ended to every individual, right? But what is our line? At what point do we say absolutely no way? And so I have fear around what society and what humanity and what heart and community will look like. So our rebellion is, to have Steve and Chris over for dinner and have the kids love on community.
Yeah, I just want to say too, when we went over for dinner a couple of weeks ago, it's good to see you because you're sharp. You were really tired when we came over last time, and it's really nice to hear you sharp and articulate and rested. Because I think you were pretty exhausted the day we went over. But I also wanted to say, that hypervigilance. I mean, I may or may not have had an advantage. So I grew up in something of the streets of New York City, and that's how you walk down the street. You walk down the street hypervigilant. You had extra bus fare in both of your shoes in case you were robbed, and that happened. So you had a way back home if you were out, in another town or something. You'd gone for a bus someplace, and that's the way I feel like I'm back now to that hypervigilance. Just opening, your sensoria and your watchfulness to check and see, where's everybody at around you. You take nothing for granted anymore. But I also wanted to say, Ayana's 2 daughters are just amazing, and it's just like, can I say their names?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So her first one is named Temple Wilder, and no, sorry, Wilder. I got them conflated. Wow. Sorry, Wilder Grace is her first child, and it's like, careful what you name your kid. She's definitely this just wonderful piece of energy. So the second child, who's just over a year now, right? She was year 9/11, right? She was born in 9/11 last year. Is named Temple, and I can't remember the middle name.
Temple Leona.
Temple Leona. All right. So Temple is like this little Buddha that sits on your lap. It's like having your own little, compact little Buddha to hang around with. And she just emanates this amazing peace and inward grace. It's just really spectacular. And then when they're ready for Greek mythology, we're here.
Wonderful. We're going to need lots of teachers, lots of mentors. We're going to need a lot of community, because it's really true. We need each other to raise our children. I can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. So that's what my hope is that maybe out of all of this chaos, that local communities will band together, right? That will come together and say, all right, you know what? The public school system's not working. So let's create something new.
It's over.
Let's create it authentically, and create it with the people that we want to be the teachers, and let's create it intentionally rather than kind of passively sending your kids to school. What are they learning? Right? Just create the community that we want to create, and re-envision what that's going to look like individually. So it's going to take more work for sure, but I want you to be there to teach them. And Chris was teaching Wilder about astrology on this beautiful board. Mm-hmm. With the planets, and Wilder, like, that was a visual that she understood the solar system because of that. It's really a magical little tool for teaching, and mm-hmm. I want that to be education for them, mm-hmm. to learn about astrology, to learn about songs and mythology, and that be part of education, and finding people who are going to help steward them in their life and their creativity. And so maybe that's where the focus of the hope comes in, right? So I cannot be pessimistic because I'm a parent. I have to be an optimist. I have to be for that beauty mm-hmm. that I want to create for them, because I'm not going to succumb to that I'm powerless in this, or that there are shadows that are alive. Like, I didn't even look at the Malloch thing. I shut it, because I don't want to open that door. I am going to devote myself to whatever I can that is in the light, right? Not that I'm going to ignore the shadow. I don't personally want to see the images of the shadow sometimes.
Well, you've got your husband to take care of that. I think he's got that corner of the world.
Well, it's so interesting, because he is a creature that deeply explores that shadow and needs to, for his essence and his soul. And I'm not that creature that needs to go out. I'm like, all right, I don't want to invoke it, so I'll just hear a little bit about it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to go too far in, because that's just sticky, and I don't want to get myself into the muck. I want to focus on what I can. Otherwise, maybe it's also I'm more sensitive. Like, I'm so deeply sensitive. know if I have that in me, that
It's
warrior.
not for everyone to do.
And that warrior, that's powerful. Like and I'm so grateful that he is, and that he's bold and courageous enough. Because also I recognize that I have not been so bold. I don't make public statements. I'm not fighting the fight. Like I'm a mother, and I'm a writer, and I'm a worker. I mean, I wish I was writing more, but I'm working for our income. Like I'm working and I'm mothering and I'm trying to create beauty at home. And that for me is full, and that has its own struggles. And I've recently even stopped listening to the news because why? Like right now, it's not.
Well, I think you have to know your role, right? If you can figure out what your role is and, be within those parameters and know where you can help out and be effective, I think that's, know thyself. I think it's really important. So I want to ask a difficult question. Can I ask a difficult question?
Yeah.
Since we're sort of on the topic here. Okay. When I look at somebody like Ari Emanuel or Zeke Emanuel, who is Rahm Emanuel's brother, are you familiar with the Emanuels?
Rob Emanuel.
No, so Zeke Emanuel, Ari Emanuel, and Rahm Emanuel. There are three brothers.
So Rahm is the only one that I know.
Rahm is the mayor. Used to work for Obama.
He went to the same college that I did.
Zeke was the guy who was an author of the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act, and he's been very vocal about death panels. Right? He says, "Oh, I'm only going to live till I'm 75 because after 75 there's no more usefulness." Right? But he's very vocal about death panels, which I think is kind of creepy. And they are the sons of two parents who came from Germany to Israel, and they were part of the Irgun gang, which was involved in the bombing of the King David Hotel. So when I look at somebody like Ari Emanuel or Zeke Emanuel, and I look at somebody like Mark Zuckerberg, who happens to be Jewish as well, and his mindset is all about control. We're going to control censorship, right? We're going to control what people say. And then you have Zeke Emanuel said, we're going to control people's lives, right? We're going to make sure that at a certain point they go through a death panel. And I'm thinking, isn't this what this group of people went through at a certain point in time vis-a-vis their evolutionary process, right? It's like, didn't they experience that already? And if that's true, then why is this happening? And the question is, and this is a very difficult question to ask, is there an unchecked animus inside the Jewish community around the Holocaust that has unfinished business? And are we seeing a manifestation of that in some ways? Because it seems to me we're getting very close to those very same factors that rose up in Nazi Germany, right? I think we're all dealing with this now. So this is something I never thought about, but listening to you and hearing what you've brought to the discussion today, I think it's a question that's worth asking. Is there something unchecked here that hasn't been resolved?
I don't have any ability to answer.
Yeah. Steve, Chris, you have any insight? Are you going to stay out of this lane here?
Yeah,
I'm just going to say that in 10 minutes, I think I have to return to my children.
That's
but
fine.
I want to hear the answer to this, and then, but I just don't have I can't contribute to the answer.
Yeah.
Well, what popped into my head is that, the abused becomes the abuser. And if you don't work with your shadow side, if you don't work with the tremendous work that this book is as a ritual of healing was a blessing for your whole family and the whole family line. So if you don't face that demon, then it continues to exert its influence in your life. So could that be what you're seeing, Robert? Is that what?
Well, it sounds like
her
father has done the work.
He's done the work, and she's done the work.
Like to me. I mean, everything I hear is like he's got an open heart. People sit down.
So he went into helping other
The
people
question
in
might be
him.
better phrased as an individual, right? Rather than a whole group of people. But is there an individual animus in a certain kind of person that's because these are individual people that are.
Yeah, but groups have specific animuses too. And I'm sorry to say, but it's true. Yeah. It's true. But that means that individuals inside of the group do not have to be beholden to that animus. Like your father, who seems to have worked through whatever pain and suffering and trauma that he's gone through, but not everybody within that group has done that specifically, right? And I think we all have a certain cross to bear in some ways. We all do.
True. And it does make me think of like the Israeli military, where everyone goes through that process as a young adult, and that there's this huge defense because of like this feeling that comes from never again, right? So this never again roots itself in this really reactive hyper militarization of hyper protection, but then there's the West Bank and Gaza, where there's these questions that are so big. And so like I do wonder, that does connect to that kind of collective animus, and that question. That's something that came up to me, but I don't have an answer.
That was a great answer. Thank you for participating and adding that perspective. And I think it's a part of the puzzle. And I think we should always be able to ask questions like this, by the way, and I think it's an important part of having a dialogue and being able to explore it and figure things out. And it may be a good idea or a bad idea, or one that's worth some merit. And thanks for at least listening to it and,
oh yeah, of course. And
sharing your insight. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. I do think that the reactions of a collective is something to watch for. That was something that Jordan was talking a little bit about, right? With the generations, like the reaction from the predecessor, right? Within a smaller group of people.
Exactly.
So, those are definitely powerful.
Oh, I gotta play your video before you go.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's end with that. Yeah.
Video. Yes.
So you got it queued up?
I do have it queued up.
Great.
All right.
Great. So this
Ayana,
is
you talk about it, Ayana. Here,
set it up.
My video?
Yeah,
Tell the story about
whiskey video.
The Flutterby.
Oh, okay. That was very beautiful moment captured in history and in time by Chris, who was sitting up front, and she was filming the evening. And I was so nervous about her filming. I'm so glad that I said, yes, film it, because there was this really magical moment that happened that, I was thanking the invisibles, like thanking God, thanking the mystery, thanking all of the guardians and the angels around me for being there in that moment that so much of this has built towards, right? Like when you're imagining the culmination of so much work, that book reading, that book launch, that is that culminating moment. And so I just had a moment where I was thanking all of that invisible energy and ancestors and God. And then this miraculous thing happens, which I didn't see until Chris did.
No one saw it.
And then brought me back to, but a little, like when I thank the invisibles, a little blue butterfly, like hovering in the air behind me, just kind of lights up.
Well, the will-o'-the-wisp, really.
Yeah, just comes up from right in front of you.
And we, Ayana, we didn't see it even when we played back the video. It was Andrew and Chiwa called us and said, we just watched the video. Did you see this? And we didn't see it. They pointed it out to us.
So
that was a little angel that just lit up. Saying, oh, thanks. Yes, I'm here.
It just happened to Robert. I don't know if you know that, but was that yesterday,
Robert? 2 days ago?
2 days ago?
It was Wednesday, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
The exact same thing happened to Robert on his show the other day.
Well, mine was behind, and yours yours is a very nice shade of violet. So there's a little bit of a lead in. And how long ago was this? When did you do this?
2017, June 2017.
3 years ago. Okay, so let's go. Let's play this thing. It's really cool.
It's really sweet.
And then in 2010, I got a phone call from my father. And this is after years of distance. We had been very close and traveled together in my childhood throughout my entire life. And then these 10, 12 years of distance passed. And when he called, he said, I'm ready to tell my life story. And I said, I'm ready to write your life story. And he came to Asheville less than 2 weeks later. He booked a flight, and we had this time together in a one-bedroom apartment in Montford that exists as like a time capsule in my life.
That's good.
We shared, and not as a daughter to father, but as a woman to a man, getting to see the complexity of his soul and hearing the stories that I had been craving for years prior. So this book, it's kind of all of that. And the real gifts, though, are greater than the product. The real gifts are my reconnection with my father, and my connection with my grandparents and my heritage. So I also want to just say thank you to Malloch for hosting this space and creating community around books and readers and writers. I want to thank Steve and Chris Creamy, my publishers, who enabled me to be here now, and who believe in me and make me believe in myself all the more. So thank you both for being in my life. I also
also just want to thank the invisibles, the guides, and the spirits and the ancestors who.
There it is. Did you catch it?
Yeah, that was awesome. It was right on cue.
Yeah.
That was so cool. Let's do that again.
Hosting this space and creating community around books and readers and writers. I want to thank Steve and Chris Creamy, my publishers, who enabled me to be here now and who believe in me and make me believe in myself all the more. So thank you both for being in my life. I also just want to thank the invisibles, the guides, and the spirits and the ancestors who
and there they are.
So are a part of this journey.
That's so cool. They're like, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Wonderful.
Yeah, well done.
Well, thank you so much, Robert and Steve and Chris. I'm really honored to be here and to tap into this community. And thank you for hosting Jordan. I know it's so meaningful to him that he has a community, a space to share and connect. So thank you so much. And yeah, I've been really enjoyed this conversation. Really been honored to be here.
Yeah, you're absolutely lovely inside and out. You're welcome
That's
here anytime. Right. And tell your dad I'd love to have him on my show.
Okay.
Oh, that would be so wonderful. I would love that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye,
Thanks,
Ayana.
Ayana.
Bye, Anna.
Great to see you. Thank you, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
Are you guys leaving too now?
I don't know.
You don't have to go unless you have to go.
Should we continue?
I don't know. I'm still waiting on a delivery of a generator, and no one's called me yet. So I guess it's not coming again yet today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that was a great. She's lovely.
Isn't she? And she's like the embodiment of gratitude. I mean, it's so real.
Very clear. Total embodiment. I may put her on the spot a little bit with that question, but since she was kind of going into that part of history and trauma, it was like, well, why is this happening again?
Right. And why are they the perpetrators?
Well, I'm not saying that they're the perpetrators. I think that'd be unfair because there seems to be a fair amount of perpetrators. Klaus Schwab is clearly not Jewish, right? Okay. But he is clearly at the tip of the public spear on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So, but at the same time, you do have people like Zeke Emanuel or Mark Zuckerberg who clearly have come out of a certain world where there were certain things like the lack of freedom of speech, lack of freedom of movement, people forced to an early death, right? They have a relationship to that culture. Then why would they seemingly be participating in what looks to be on the surface a recreation or a mirroring of that on some level? So I think it's a valid question to ask. I don't think it's specific unto them because, Klaus Schwab, we'll just leave it right there. But I felt like it was something that something that I think is worth exploring. The unchecked animus, and every group has one. We watched Muhammad Ali with Sly Stone the other day, and Muhammad Ali was like crying out for reparations, and we built this place, and right. So that would also include an unchecked animus in some ways, and I think groups, collectives have that, whatever that is, and sometimes it can manifest itself into very, very dangerous situations, very dangerous situations. What did we see this summer with the riots and the burning and BLM, the manifestation of the shadow of an unchecked animus, and that's where things get really ugly. That's the egregore that gets turned loose, onto society. And, where it starts is, again, she brought up something really important, the individual, the family, how you raise your kids, and, working on some of those things so that they don't really exist, or if they exist, you can kind of root them out so that they don't become this predominant sort of spirit or the shadow that kind of reigns in an unexamined way through one's culture or one's community or one's religion. And until I think we really examine that and really just put an end to those things or completely exercise them, I don't think we have much of a chance of really living together, right? Because what happens is that these powers that be, these social engineers, know how to play on that all the time.
They do. They exploit it.
They exacerbate it, and they keep this animus, either visible or unchecked, alive. And that's the cudgel that's been used against all of us.
And because it's in the shadow, you don't see it, and that's how it can be used against you, and it comes at you sideways.
Yep.
You don't see it coming.
Yeah, they say in yoga that ignorance or ignorant karma, it's always looking for a body to inhabit. In other words, that's one way of looking at reincarnation. And it doesn't really care what body inhabits. It's just looking for a place to go. And the work is to attenuate, thin it, first to thin it to where it becomes just sort of an echo in you, and then eventually it becomes what's called burnt seed. It has nothing to grow on,
Right.
and once you've reached that sort of perfection, you've burnt it, and it just won't grow anymore. It doesn't exist anymore. But that's the great work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, and if you're not willing to do that, then you're feeding it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
yeah, because look, everybody theoretically has a bone to pick, right?
That's right.
Everybody has a bone to pick. Every group, if you could drill down, there's a bone to pick. There's always been an underclass to some extent, even though perhaps there are some very select groups that may not have that how do I say this, vulnerability because of their select status. But there's a lot. We all have come from very different and very difficult stories in our lives. I know, Steve, you grew up in New York, and there's a whole kind of story that goes along with being Italian in New York and coming from another country, and how that all self-organizes. Basically my family on my father's side comes from very poor people in the South, and so we all have kind of an interesting and yet very human tale to tell, and I think if we can sort of tie those things up and kind of give each other a bit of a break and a little bit of a pass, I think we might be able to do something. But until it's examined, and especially at a collective level, I don't think we're going to be able to completely heal and move into this kind of new version of the Aquarian age. And maybe it will. Hopefully it will.
Yeah, I was talking to the barista at the coffee shop up the corner, and she was I guess she's going to school and she's taking sociology, and she's just going on about how I don't understand my white privilege.
Oh, was she? And tell me that.
And I was like, I mean, I always had food growing up, but if I wanted a bicycle, I had to pretty much ask for like 3 years before they could save up enough money for a bicycle. It just, it was up until the point where my father had his own business and it started doing well, this particular gas station in Brooklyn. It was a struggle. He was in and out of work, and my mom had a little secretary job. And, and it's very typical. It's not a big deal. And like I said, I certainly had plenty to eat. That was good, but there's nothing extra. We never went on vacations or anything like that. And, I try to explain to her what fucking white privilege did I have growing up, well,
it's your skin tone. It opened doors for you.
Didn't matter.
But
it didn't matter because that was the glasses through which she viewed everything. So it just wasn't a conversation.
You notice how Joe Biden never gets called out on his white privilege?
No, not even when he disses blacks, right?
This guy he's living in about a 10,000 square foot house, in multiple houses, acres of property. And I also think it's ironic that he has a German Shepherd, right? Now, if Trump had a German Shepherd, what would they say about that German Shepherd?
Right.
Oh my God, it's a German Shepherd.
So he's even fascist with his dogs, right?
That's a Luftwaffe dog, right? But with Biden, it's just a poor, unfortunate little dog. No, not so little. That put a boot on him, right? So the media is just so selective in terms of how they message these things, and this is why people are turning it off in droves, total droves.
People starting to see it.
Yep, I think pretty soon I think we're going to ditch our TV since we don't need it for Airbnb anymore.
Well, since we're done with the Airbnb, this is today our last
sport. I got it for sports. Sports is gone, so
I know. I got rid of Sling TV. I had it for sports, and I had it for Tucker Carlson.
Yeah,
And
I can get Tucker on YouTube.
Yeah, and look, Tucker has to play a role, right? He has to play a role. He's got limits with his role. I don't always like, sort of what he's done, but I also know that he has performed a service in a large degree. He kept people from going just completely into a trough over the summer. Like if it wasn't for Tucker Carlson and what he was able to talk about in the aftermath of the George Floyd stuff, I think things would have been very hard for a lot of people. So, I'm grateful for that. Right. But there's a limit. There's a limit with what he can do and what he can talk about. And I just decided I don't watch sports anymore. And I can get them on YouTube and I'm done. Sling TV, see you later. Yeah,
that's it. And and we don't have the income we used to, so be it. It's what it is.
Well, listen, you guys are going to have the Underground Railroad B&B, and we will send you as many people as possible.
Yeah,
but you'll take a few steps in order to make that happen. And I don't think you have to give up your income just because you decided to go independent, which I think is actually a great thing and might even be more successful for you.
No, and Chris is firing up her easel. And she's starting to do some painting, and so away we go.
See if I can get good enough that I can sell some artwork or something.
Cool. Good. Excellent. Well, another one, number 27.
That's it.
27.
That's it.
In the books. So the next time we talk will be the 1st of January. A lot will have happened by then.
Oh, my.
A lot will happen.
Yeah. Well, everybody, good luck getting through the, what is it, the 14th is the eclipse?
Yeah, the 14th is the solar eclipse.
Okay, so there's that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the, then there's the 21st. There's a conjunction. So
big super
everybody
conjunction.
Sit tight, be cool. And we'll see you on the other side of it, and hopefully be heading in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, listen, I think we're all headed in the right direction, regardless of what the direction that they're creating is going in. We have a say to a large extent about the direction of our own lives, and it may look different, it may feel different, but when we let go of that, I think that's when we begin to get into some serious issues. And I think we need to be doing something every day in order to reaffirm that. And I think you guys, by jumping off the Airbnb train, I think you're doing that.
Yeah, I just want nothing to do with them anymore. Once I heard that they were selling information to the Chinese Communist Party, I thought, why would I support them?
Yeah.
I can't in all good conscience.
Yeah.
So come on down.
Go on
buy
down
some
there.
books. Buy
lots of books.
Buy Ayana's book.
Right. Buy Steve's book. There's a bunch of really nice books.
We got another one coming out, working on now, and we have a new one. Just got a great review in Forward Reviews. So, let's help each other out.
After.
Even if it's like we have some friends in Sydney, and basically every birthday we just pass the same $50 back and forth to each other, but it's great. It's great. So that's fine. That works.
Circulating the economy. All right. Chris and Steve.
Yeah, great, Robert. Good to see you again.
Thank you, everybody.
Great holiday. I'm sure we'll be connecting, offline. But you guys take care, okay?
All right.
Yes, you too. And you as well.
Chris, how's the shoulder, by the way?
Well, it's good. The bone healed up, but the tendons are still, so I can raise it like that high. Okay. That's it. But it's okay. As long as I can run the lawnmower.
But she still wants to do some shooting.
Yeah,
good.
So do more shooting.
Got the shooting bug when you came to Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay,
thanks
guys.
for asking.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So
bye, Robert.
All right, another one in the books. That's the Friday FARcast for today, the 4th of December, 12/4/20. Again, I want to thank Ayana Slizik-Blatt for being here and sharing her story and being a part of the show. Of course, Steve and Chris, as always, Logo Sophia, that's the name of their publishing company. Go check them out. I'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live. And what am I going to look at? I'm sure something will come up. Oh, by the way, I did an hour with Astrology with Heather yesterday. So that's going to be up on her channel, I think on Tuesday or Thursday of this coming week. And it's a good show. And we talk about the upcoming solar eclipse, and we talk about a few other things that go into January and February as well. So you're going to want to check that out. And I'm thinking about putting together a couple of webinars here coming up. So, and maybe we'll get into a little human design on Sunday. I think that's what we'll do. I think we'll go down the human design portal. All right, Chatlandia, love you. Look at that, JMP, you're reading my mind. Stop that. Use your head in order to discern what's real. Your heart said what's possible. It's been a great day so far. I'm sure it's only going to get better. There we go. There it is. Ba-boom. See ya.